de souci. Buvard, votre 13 ans.
Ok.
Ah oui, ça commence pas.
Ça commence, c'est pas commencé.
Good morning, dear colleagues. The sitting is open. One announcement from my side in relation to the decisions by the PESH, IMCO and LIBE committees to enter into interinstitutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 71, paragraph 1, announced at the opening of the sitting last Monday, 2nd of May. I have received the requests for vote in Parliament pursuant to Rule 71, paragraph 2, from the ID and ECR groups, reaching at least the medium threshold on the decisions of the LIBE Committee to enter into negotiations on the two proposals for regulations concerning the EU Digital COVID Certificate, and the votes will be held tomorrow. Concerning the other decisions to enter into negotiations, I have received no request for a vote in Parliament by members or a political group or groups reaching at least the medium threshold, and therefore the committees may start the negotiations on the basis of these reports. The next item on the agenda is a Council and Commission statements, the social and economic consequences for the European Union of the Russian war in Ukraine, reinforcing the European Union's capacity to act. I'll start by giving the floor to Brigitte Klinker for the Council. Brigitte, you have the floor.
La présidente du Parlement européen, Madame la présidente de la Commission européenne,
President of the
Mesdames
European
et
Commission,
Messieurs les députés,
ladies and gentlemen, members of the Parliament.
l'Agence des Nations Unies pour les
The
réfugiés
United Nations
estime
Agency for
que plus de
Refugees
5 millions de civils
believes that over
ukrainiens auraient déjà
5 million
fui leur
Ukrainian
pays
civilians have
dès
already left
l'agression
their
militaire
country
par la Russie.
due to
Lors de la
military
dernière
aggression from
réunion
Russia.
informelle de Versailles,
During the
les
last
chefs
informal
d'État
meeting
ou
in
de
Versailles,
gouvernement européens
the heads of state
ont
and
fermement
government
condamné
in
l'agression
Europe
militaire
have firmly
injustifiée
condemned
et
the
non
unjustified
provoquée de la
military
Russie contre
intervention
l'Ukraine
and
et ont
unprovoked
affirmé
aggression
que
from Russia
l'Union
against
de
Ukraine.
ses États
And they
membres
reaffirmed that the
continueront
European
à
Union and
fournir
its
un
member
soutien
states will continue to
politique,
provide
financier,
political,
matériel et
financial,
humanitaire
material
coordonné.
and humanitarian
Unis et
aid
solidaires,
in a
les États
coordinated
membres se
manner.
sont engagés dans un effort
The member
conséquent
states
afin d'accueillir des
have made
millions de
significant
réfugiés.
coordinated efforts to
Au-delà
take
de la
in
crise
millions of
humanitaire, ce
refugees.
conflit a
Beyond the
inévitablement
humanitarian
ralenti la phase de
crisis,
reprise post-Covid-19.
It has also
Des réactions
inevitably led to the slowdown
nationales
of
et
the
européennes
post-COVID recovery
coordonnées
period.
et inédites ont permis d'en atténuer les effets socio-économiques.
Coordinated European
Mais
actions
des
have
enjeux
allowed us to offset the worst of the social and economic
restent
consequences,
devant
but there are still major
S'il est
challenges
certain
ahead of us.
que cette vague de réfugiés aura des
This
conséquences
wave
budgétaires
of
encore
refugees will
difficiles à
undoubtedly
chiffrer
have
pour
budgetary
l'Union européenne
consequences
et
which
les
are
États
difficult to
membres, en
estimate for the
particulier
European Union and
les
its
États
member states,
limitrophes à
particularly
l'Ukraine.
the
Cela peut
member states that
représenter
border
également
Ukraine.
une opportunité pour l'Union
However,
européenne
it represents
si les
an
réfugiés
opportunity
souhaitent
for the European
s'intégrer
Union
durablement
if
au marché
refugees
du
want
travail
to
dans les pays
integrate in
d'accueil.
a long-term manner
La révision
into
du
the labour
règlement
market into
CARE
their
adopté
host
début avril
countries.
permet de mobiliser
In
divers
April,
fonds
we
européens
adopted a budget which
pour
would allow
financer
us
des
to
mesures en
mobilise
faveur des
different
réfugiés
European
ukrainiens.
funds in order to
À
finance
titre
the
d'exemple, ces fonds permettent
welcome of Ukrainian
d'investir dans
refugees.
l'éducation,
For
l'emploi,
example,
le
investing
logement,
in
la
education,
santé, les
employment,
services de
housing,
garde d'enfants
healthcare,
et aussi dans
childcare
l'assistance
services, and
matérielle
also
de
in
base.
basic
En
material
outre, le
assistance.
4 mars, le Conseil a adopté
Furthermore, on the
à
4th of March, the
l'unanimité
Council
une décision
unanimously
d'exécution
adopted
permettant
an implementing
d'instaurer
decision which
une
would allow us
protection
to
temporaire
set
aux
up
personnes
temporary
fuyant la guerre en
protection
Ukraine
for people fleeing
et
war in
offrant ainsi
Ukraine,
des droits harmonisés dans toute l'Union,
and will
tout
ensure
en garantissant
harmonised
l'équilibre
rights
des
throughout the
efforts
European Union,
entre les différents
while
États
ensuring that
membres.
there is a fair
Il
share of
s'agit
the effort
ici du
being
droit
made between
de
member
vivre
states.
et de travailler dans l'Union,
It's the right to
mais
live
aussi
and
d'avoir
work in the
accès aux
European Union,
prestations
but
sociales.
also to have access to
Certains
social
États
care.
membres octroient même un soutien
Some member
financier
states are also
aux
providing
réfugiés dès
financial
leur
support
arrivée.
to refugees when they arrive.
Afin de soutenir l'intégration, les
In
enfants
order
en
to
âge
provide
scolaire ont
support
accès
for
au système d'éducation nationale.
school-aged children,
Les adultes
they will have access
bénéficient
to
de
national
parcours de
education
formation
systems.
et d'intégration
Adults can
dans
have
le marché du
access to
travail
training courses and
avec
integration into
l'application
the labour
active
market
des
through
services
the active
publics à
implementation
l'emploi
of public
et des
services
partenaires
for
sociaux.
employment
En
and
termes
involving
économiques,
social
l'agression
partners.
russe contre
In economic
l'Ukraine,
terms,
les
the Russian
sanctions
aggression
et les
against Ukraine,
contre-mesures,
the
leur
sanctions
impact
and
sur les chaînes de
countermeasures,
transport et de
their
valeur
impact on
et le
the
découplage de
value
la
and
Russie du
transport
commerce
chains,
international
and
affecteront vraisemblablement aussi
cuts to
l'économie
international
européenne,
transport. These are all
déjà
also going to have
affaiblie
an
par la
impact
crise
on
du
the
Covid-19,
European economy
et
that's
ce,
already
de
been
manière
weakened by the
durable.
COVID-19 crisis.
Le
And
conflit a fait
this will be
flamber
a
les prix et
long-term
la fourniture
impact.
des matières premières, comme le blé, les céréales ou
Raw
l'énergie.
materials such as wheat,
L'inflation
cereals and
croissante en
energy will
Europe
be affected.
impacte nos ménages
Increasing
et nos
inflation
entreprises,
in
la
the EU is going to
sécurité
impact
et
our businesses,
l'approvisionnement énergétique, ainsi que
as
la
well
lutte
as energy
contre certaines
supply and
pénuries
security,
sont devenues
and we
une
will have to
priorité.
fight against certain
Les dirigeants
shortages
européens à Versailles
as a
ont
priority.
convenu de réduire la
The member
dépendance
states in
des États
Versailles
membres à
agreed
l'égard
to
des
reduce
importations de
member
gaz,
states' dependence on
pétrole
gas
et charbon
and
russe,
oil
ainsi que leur
and
dépendance
coal
des
from
combustibles
Russia,
fossiles,
as well as on their dependence
pour
on
se
fossil
libérer de
fuels.
l'emprise de Gazprom et gérer
order
la hausse des prix de
to,
l'énergie et sécuriser les
Be
chaînes
freer from
d'approvisionnement,
Gazprom, and in order to ensure
l'Europe doit diversifier
supply
l'offre,
chains, Europe has to
accélérer la
diversify
production
its supply
d'énergie verte,
to accelerate
acheter
the production of
conjointement
green
les
energy,
énergies et
to
réduire
ensure
la
that they
demande.
have a joint
Tout
purchasing
cela
for
en
energies
préservant
and reduce
la
demand. At
compétitivité
the same
mondiale
time, we have to
à long
maintain
terme
our
des entreprises de
competitiveness on
l'Union
the global
européenne
level,
qui subissent
in the long
les
term.
coûts élevés de l'énergie.
even though
Réduire
we
les
are
dépenses
seeing higher
stratégiques de
energy
l'Europe
costs.
passe par l'accélération de
Reducing
certains
our
processus,
dependency
comme les
will
transitions
require a
vertes
certain
et
number of
numériques.
actions, such as the
Sous
digital and
la
green
présidence
transitions.
française,
Under
le
the French
Conseil
presidency,
est
the
à pied d'œuvre
Council
pour assurer l'approvisionnement de gaz
is doing
l'hiver
everything it
prochain.
can to ensure
Dans ce
the supply
contexte,
of
il est
gas
primordial de
coming
maintenir
winter.
une solidarité
Therefore, it's
européenne
necessary to
forte
ensure
et de
strong European
respecter les sanctions
solidarity
que nous
and
avons
to ensure
fixées.
that we respect the
Je
sanctions that
salue
we
aussi
have
la
set.
Commission qui présentera
I
le
also
plan
welcome
Repower
the fact
EU
that
le 18 mai
the
prochain
Commission will be
pour
presenting the
réduire notre
Repower EU
dépendance
programme on the
énergétique
18th of
vis-à-vis de la
May
Russie
in
à
order
travers une
to
action européenne
take European
conjointe en faveur
joint
d'une énergie
actions
plus
in
abordable,
favour
plus
of
sûre
more
et plus durable.
affordable, safer and more
Nous sommes
sustainable
à un tournant
energy.
historique pour notre
We are at a
transition
historic
et
turning
notre
point
autonomie
in terms of our
énergétique. La
energy
transition verte
independence
apportera
and
de
our
nouvelles
transition.
opportunités en termes
The green
d'emploi,
transition will
tout
provide
en
new
nous sortant
opportunities
à long terme
for
de
jobs,
cette
and at
dépendance
the long term,
énergétique
it will
qui nous
free
gratte.
us from our
Il est
energy
aussi clair
independency that is holding
que
us
ces
back.
impacts sociaux et
Clearly,
distributifs à
these
court terme,
social,
notamment sur les plus
short-term
vulnérables, doivent
effects,
être
particularly for the
réexaminés
most
à la
vulnerable,
lumière de la
have to be
situation
re-examined in
actuelle et
light
de
of the
son
current
évolution.
situation and
En l'état
how
actuel,
it evolves.
cette transition est notre
Currently,
seule option
this
viable.
transition is our
Nous
only
devons donc
viable
accélérer
solution.
sur
Therefore, we have to
l'efficacité énergétique,
accelerate our
sur
efforts
les
on energy
renouvelables et
efficiency,
sur
on
l'hydrogène.
renewables, and on
La pauvreté
hydrogen.
énergétique touche
Energy
aujourd'hui
poverty
près de
today
34
affects
millions de personnes dans
about
l'Union.
34 million
Environ
people in the
une
European
personne
Union.
sur 5
That's
dont le
about
revenu
1
est
in
inférieur
5
au
people
seuil de
whose
pauvreté
income is below
déclarent
the
ne
poverty
pas être en
threshold.
mesure de
They
chauffer
declare that they
correctement son
cannot
logement.
afford to properly
Comme
heat
annoncé
their
dans le
home.
paquet Fit for
As we
55
announced in the
et en vue
for
d'assurer une
55
transition
package,
équitable vers la
in order
neutralité
to
climatique,
ensure a
la
fair
Commission
transition
a
towards climate
proposé
neutrality, the
d'examiner les
Commission
aspects
has
sociaux et du travail
said
à
that
la
it will
transition
examine
verte.
the green transition's
Sous
impact on
présidence
the
française, le
social
Conseil s'est
sector and
engagé
on
dans des
employment.
discussions en
The
vue de
Commission has
l'adoption
also undertaken
finale de la
discussions
proposition de
in view
recommandations
of the final
visant
adoption
à
of
assurer une transition
recommendations which
équitable
will
vers la
ensure
neutralité
a
climatique
fair
qui
transition
s'attaque
towards
à la
climate
pauvreté
neutrality
énergétique
and which
et
will
vise
also
à favoriser
fight
l'accès
energy
des
poverty
individus aux services
and will
énergétiques
ensure
essentiels.
targeted
Cette
actions for
proposition
individuals
promeut
to ensure that they
un
have
monitorage
essential energy
accru
services.
de la mise
We
en
will
œuvre
have
des politiques
further
de transition
monitoring
équitable,
of
en
the
particulier
implementation
des
of fair
retombées
transition,
sur les
and
groupes les plus
particularly looking at
défavorisés
its impact
et du
on the
risque de
most
pauvreté
marginalized groups
énergétique.
and those most at risk of
Certains
energy
États membres
poverty.
ont par ailleurs
Some
déjà favorisé
member
l'accès à
states have
l'énergie
also
en tant que service
already
essentiel pour les groupes les
ensured
plus
access to
vulnérables,
energy for the most
conformément
vulnerable
au
groups
principe
as a
20 du
priority,
socle européen des droits sociaux.
in line
Le
with
Conseil
the target
continuera
20
d'agir
of
de
the
manière
European
décisive
social goals.
pour lutter contre les
We have
effets
to act in a
néfastes du
decisive manner in order
conflit sur nos
to fight
économies
against the worst
et nos
effects of the
sociétés,
conflict on our
tout en
societies and
garantissant
our
un effort
economies,
commun et
and ensuring
solidaire
that we
entre les
show
États membres.
solidarity
Notre
and unity
priorité
between member states in our
reste la
actions. Our
protection
priority
et la
has to be
consolidation de notre modèle
protecting
économique
and
et social
consolidating our
en
economic and
veillant
social
à ce
model,
que
at the
personne
same time
ne soit
ensuring
délaissé.
that nobody
Je vous
is left
remercie
behind.
de votre
Thank you all very
attention.
much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Klinker. And now I invite the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, dear Roberta, Madame la Ministre, honourable members. Next week, we will mark Europe Day. It is the 72nd birthday of our Union, and on this Europe Day, we will talk about, of course, the future of our Union, how we make it stronger, more resilient, closer to the people. But the answer to all these questions we cannot give alone in these days. The answer is also given in Ukraine. It is given in Kharkiv, where Ukrainian first responders venture into the combat zone to help those wounded by Russian attacks. It is given in the small town of Bucha, where survivors are coping with the atrocities committed against civilians by Russian soldiers. And it is given these days in Mariupol, where Ukrainians are resisting a Russian force which greatly outnumbers them, because they are fighting to reaffirm basic ideas, that they are the master of their future and not a foreign leader, that it is the international law that counts and not the right of might, and that Putin must pay a price, a high price, for his brutal aggression. Thus, the future of our European Union is also written in Ukraine. And therefore, today I would like to speak about two topics. First, about sanctions, and second, about relief and reconstruction for Ukraine. Today, we are presenting our sixth package of sanctions. First, we are listing high-ranking military officers and individuals who committed war crimes in Bucha, and those who are responsible for the inhuman siege of the city of Mariupol. This sends another important signal to all perpetrators of the Kremlin. We know who you are. We will hold you accountable. You're not getting away with this. Second, we finally de-SWIFT Sberbank. Sberbank is the largest Russian bank. It holds round about 37% of the whole banking sector. And we will also de-SWIFT two other major banks in Russia. By that, we hit banks that are systemically critical to the Russian financial system and Putin's ability to wage destruction. This will solidify the complete isolation of the Russian financial sector from the global system. Third, we're banning 3 big Russian state-owned broadcasters from our airwaves. They will not be allowed to distribute their content anymore in the European Union in whatever shape or form, be it on cable, via satellite, on the internet, or via smartphone apps. We have identified these TV channels as mouthpieces that amplify Putin's lies and propaganda aggressively. And we should not give them a stage anymore to spread these lies. Fourth, the Kremlin relies on accountants, consultants, and spin doctors from Europe, and this will now stop. We're banning those services from being provided in to Russian companies. And my final point, number 5, on sanctions is oil. When the leaders met in Versailles, they agreed to phase out our dependency on Russian fossil fuels. In the last sanction package, as you know, we started with coal. Today, we are addressing our dependency on Russian oil, and let's be clear, it will not be easy, because some member states are strongly dependent on Russian oil, but we simply have to do it. So today, we will propose to ban all Russian oil from Europe. This will be a complete import ban on all Russian oil, seaborne and pipeline, crude and refined. We will make sure that we phase out Russian oil in an orderly fashion, so in a way that allows us and our partners to secure alternative supply routes and at the same time be very careful that we minimize the impact on the global market. And this is why we will phase out Russian supply of crude oil within 6 months and refined products by the end of the year. Thus, we maximize the pressure on Russia, while at the same time, and this is important, we minimize the collateral damage to us and our partners around the globe, because to help Ukraine, we have to make sure that our economy remains strong. Honourable members, with all these steps, we are depriving the Russian economy from its ability to diversify and to modernize. Putin wanted to wipe out Ukraine from the map, and he will clearly not succeed. On the contrary, Ukraine has risen in bravery and in unity, and it is his own country, Russia, that Putin is sinking. Honourable members, we want Ukraine to win this war, but we also want to set the conditions for Ukraine's success in the aftermath of the war. And this is my second point, relief and reconstruction. The first step is immediate relief. This is about short-term economic support to help Ukrainians cope with the fallout of the war. We have done a lot already. Let me remind you our microfinancial assistance package or the direct support to the Ukrainian budget. In addition, we recently proposed to suspend all import duties on Ukrainian exports to our union for 1 year. And I'm sure that the European Parliament will put its weight behind this idea and this proposal. But we all know this is not enough for the short-term relief. Ukraine's GDP is expected to fall by 35 to 50% this year alone. And the IMF estimates that from May on, Ukraine needs 5 billion euros per month, plain and simply to keep the country running, so to pay pensions, to pay salaries, to provide for basic services. We have to support them, but I also know that we cannot do this alone. So I very much welcome that the United States announced massive budgetary support, and we, as Team Europe, we have to do our share too. But then, in a second phase, there is the wider reconstruction effort, and you all know that the scale of the destruction is staggering. Hospitals and schools, houses, roads, bridges, railroads, theatres, factories, you just name it. So much has to be rebuilt. Of course, in the fog of war, it is difficult to come up with a precise estimate. But economists are talking about several hundred billion euros. And here, honourable members, I think Europe has a very special responsibility towards Ukraine. With our support, and of course with the help of the international financial institutions and other global partners, Ukraine can rebuild their country for the next generation. And this is why today I propose to you that we start working on an ambitious recovery package for our Ukrainian friends. If we do it right, this package should bring massive investments to meet the needs and the necessary reforms in parallel. So it should address the existing weaknesses of the Ukrainian economy and lay the foundation for sustainable long-term growth. It could set a system of milestones and targets to make sure that the European money truly delivers to the people of Ukraine and is spent in accordance with European rules. It could help fight corruption. We have to do that. It could align the legal environment with European standards and radically upgrade Ukraine's productive capacity. And this will bring the stability and the certainty that is needed to make Ukraine an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. And eventually, honourable members, it will pave the way for Ukraine's future inside the European Union. Slava Ukraine, long live Europe.
Thank you very much, Commission President. I now give the floor to the representatives of the political groups, starting with the EPP Group, Esther de Lange.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Minister, Madam President of the European Commission. Beste collega's, het is vandaag 4 mei. En in Nederland betekent dat wij om 8 uur vanavond allemaal even stilstaan. 2 minuten staat het land stil en zwijgt om de doden te herdenken uit de Tweede Wereldoorlog en allen die daarna gestorven zijn tijdens operaties en vredesmissies wereldwijd. En op een dag als vandaag voelt het daarom een beetje vreemd aan om in dit debat, de titel zegt het al, te spreken over de economische consequenties van de oorlog hier in Europa. Het is opnieuw oorlog op ons continent en de consequenties hier in de EU vallen natuurlijk absoluut in het niet bij datgene wat er gebeurt in Oekraïne. And of course our main focus is and should remain not on the economic consequences here, but on the consequences in Ukraine and how to help them against Putin's barbaric war. And this is why I'm very grateful to the Commission that they will announce their 6th sanctions package today and for the words that the Commission has spoken about the reconstruction and the help to Ukraine. But that being said, we should also talk about the socio-economic consequences here and our capacity to act. Because as a European Union, unity is our strongest weapon against this war. And if we want to sustain this unity, we also need to address the consequences here. I think, Madam President, of the Commission for the EPP, we badly need an analysis of the cumulative effect of the war, the rising energy prices, the shortages in raw materials, new legislation on the table, the impact that has on companies and on citizens within the EU. We need to address the consequences also on families. Some of them not even turning on their heating because they can no longer do so. And this is why, of course, we're working to address these consequences in the fund that is proposed. And finally, we need to work to address the consequences on companies and on industries. And for the EPP, that means a diversification strategy for raw materials, I think, which is badly needed. The necessary investment for the rollout of renewable energy. And finally, let's be very honest, we are asking a lot from our industries. And don't get me wrong, the EPP wants to achieve the objectives of the Fit for 55 package and the climate law. But we may have to look at a legislative embargo for new legislation to make sure that we're not burdening certain industries that are suffering badly with the cumulative effect of higher prices, the ambitious Fit for 55 package, and, for example, let me mention one piece of legislation, new REACH at the same time. Let's be honest. We stand ready to work with you, but let's do it in a smart way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. De Lange. And now, on behalf of the S&D Group, I invite Irache Garcia Perez to take the floor.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President.
Hablemos sin eufemismos, señorías.
Let's be frank,
Estamos en
ladies and
guerra.
gentlemen. We are
La
at
Unión
war.
Europea
The European
respalda a
Union
Ucrania como
is
país
supporting
agredido
Ukraine
con todos
as
los
a country
medios a
that
nuestro
has,
alcance.
been aggressed
Sanciones,
with all means
armas,
available.
auxilio
Sanctions,
a refugiados
arms,
y
help to
diplomacia.
refugees and diplomacy.
Sin el valor del pueblo ucraniano
Without
y sin el
the
apoyo de la
courage
Unión
of the
Europea
Ukrainian
y
people and the
nuestros
support
aliados,
of the European
Ucrania
Union and our
no
allies,
habría resistido
Ukraine
la
would
agresión
not have
criminal
been
de
able to
Putin,
withstand
ni
the
habría
criminal aggression
frustrado
of
sus
Putin,
planes
nor
de una
frustrated his
conquista rápida.
plans for a
Ahora se
rapid
libra una
victory.
batalla decisiva en el Donbass y es
Now we're going to see a
preciso
decisive
avanzar.
battle
El
in
paso
Donbass,
siguiente
and
debe
we
de
need
ser el
to
corte de
continue.
gas y del petróleo, como hoy nos ha
The
anunciado
next step
la
has
presidenta de la
to
Comisión,
be cutting off gas
en la
and
línea
oil,
de lo que ya
as
este
the President of the
Parlamento
Commission
había
said,
planteado y por
and
lo
this is
tanto
in line
debemos
with
congratularnos.
what the Parliament
En
had
paralelo
already
debemos
said.
trabajar en una
At the same
estrategia
time,
de
we have to work
desconexión
on a
desde la
strategy,
construcción de plantas regasificadoras e interconexiones
to deconnect ourselves from
internas,
this gas,
negociación conjunta con proveedores alternativos
regasification plants
y un acelerón
and,
urgente de las
we have
renovables.
to
Yo en este
see,
sentido estoy totalmente en contra
suppliers
de lo que ha
and
planteado
quickly accelerate,
la representante del Grupo
renewables.
Popular Europeo. Creo que ahora más que nunca es
I think
necesario
now more than
avanzar en el
ever,
impulso
we
de las
need to
políticas
make
de
progress
lucha contra el
in
cambio
our
climático, porque
policies
son
to
las que han
fight
puesto en
climate
evidencia
change,
las
because
propias
these are the ones
deficiencias que
which
tenemos
clearly
como
show
Unión
our
Europea.
shortcomings as the European
Hundir a
Union.
Putin no significa abandonar
Beating
a su
Putin
suerte
does
a
not
aquellos
mean
países más
leaving
afectados por
those
su alta
countries that are
dependencia
most
del gas y de
affected by
petróleo
their high level
ruso.
of dependency
Somos
on
conscientes de
Russian
que hay
gas and
países
oil
mucho más
to their
afectados
fate. I'm
por
aware
estas
that some
decisiones.
countries that are going to
Hundir
be much more
a
affected by
Putin
these decisions
significa
than others.
resistir, fortalecer
Beating
nuestra
Putin
determinación
means
y
resisting,
reaccionar
strengthening our
colectivamente ante un
determination
momento
and,
crucial de la
reacting
historia de
together,
Europa sin ignorar
faced
los
with
efectos
this
asimétricos
crucial
de
moment
esta
in
crisis,
history, without, of course, forgetting the
intentando
asymmetrical effects
entender
of
que
this
es necesario,
crisis.
por lo tanto,
I
el principio
understand,
de
therefore, that it's
solidaridad para
necessary
todas
to
las
stand by
medidas
the
que
principle
tomemos.
of solidarity and to
Hundir
use
a
all
Putin
means available to
significa
do this.
también poner
Beating
fin a
Putin
una Unión
also
Europea
means
de ciudadanos de primera y de segunda,
putting an end
incorporando a
to
Rumanía y
first
Bulgaria
and
al espacio
second
Schengen
level
y
European
protegiendo
Union
nuestros
citizens.
valores.
We have to
He tenido la
incorporate
oportunidad
Romania and
de ver
Bulgaria
en
into
primera persona
Schengen
lo que está
and
haciendo
ensure
un
that we
país
protect
como
our
Rumanía,
values.
poniendo en valor el principio fundamental de la Unión
We
Europea
have to
de
implement the
la
principle,
solidaridad con la gestión de
the
las
fundamental
fronteras
principle of
y el
European
apoyo a los
Union, which is
refugiados.
solidarity.
Y no es posible que,
As
por un
supporting
lado, les
refugees,
estemos
it's not
dando las
possible that
gracias
on the
por
one
esa
hand we
gestión
say
y por el
thank you
otro
to these
lado no
countries for the way
seamos
that they're handling
capaces de entender
refugees,
que
but at the other
tienen el
hand we're
mismo
not
derecho que el resto
able
de
to
países cuando
say that they have
cumplen
the
todos
same
los
rights as
criterios
all
de
other
formar parte del
countries
espacio
when they
Schengen. Por lo
meet all
tanto,
of the
esa es otra
criteria that are
reflexión
necessary to be
que
part
deberíamos
of
de
the
plantear y
Schengen
sobre todo
zone.
un toque de atención al Consejo.
And this is
Nuestra
particularly what I
ciudadanía
want
es
to draw council's
consciente
attention
del drama que
to. Our
vive
citizens
y
are
ahora es
aware
la
of the
Comisión
tragedy
Europea
that
quien
is
debe de
being lived
estar a
at the
la altura
moment.
del
And
mismo
now it's
ante el
the
reto
Commission that has
financiero
to
que
be up to
supone
the financial
todas estas
challenge that
medidas.
we're
Hoy
going to
necesitamos
see,
un
and they have
gran
to make all
plan
means
económico
available. We need
urgente
a
que
big,
frene el
urgent
aumento de la
economic plan.
pobreza, la desigualdad, el desempleo y la pérdida de poder adquisitivo como consecuencia de la rampante inflación provocada por el encarecimiento de los carburantes y de los alimentos. Resulta intolerable que mientras las grandes multinacionales energéticas obtienen ingresos extraordinarios por los beneficios caídos del cielo, sean los más vulnerables los que paguen las consecuencias de esta guerra. Es que ese dinero que está en los bolsillos de algunos es a costa del sufrimiento de familias que hoy no pueden pagar la factura de la luz y se las ven y se las desean para llegar a fin de mes pudiendo pagar todas las facturas. Por lo tanto, debemos de actuar en ese sentido. En lugar de repetir los errores del pasado y recortar en medio de una crisis, debemos prorrogar la cláusula de escape del Pacto de Estabilidad y Crecimiento para invertir en nuevas tecnologías, justicia social, una defensa más sólida y un futuro libre de carbono. Y si la Unión Europea quiere mantener un liderazgo internacional frente a un creciente bloque de autocracias, tendremos que intensificar el apoyo a las poblaciones más vulnerables que están sufriendo las consecuencias de la barbarie de Putin, tanto en África como en nuestro vecindario más próximo. El futuro de Moldavia como Estado independiente y su deseo de formar parte del mundo libre debe contar con nuestro compromiso financiero y militar, no solo con buenas palabras. Una vez más, en nuestra historia nos encontramos ante el imperativo histórico de restaurar la paz en Europa y de construirla más allá de los confines de nuestra Unión. Pero no podemos aceptar una paz sin justicia, porque siempre son los humillados y ofendidos, como nos recordaba Dostoyevsky, quienes merecen un alivio a su sufrimiento, quienes merecen justicia. La única forma de alcanzar una paz digna es la derrota de Putin y la victoria de la libertad y de la democracia en Ucrania, lo que requiere nuestra unidad y nuestro sacrificio. Resistimos en 2012 para proteger el euro, resistimos en 2020 para frenar la pandemia y resistiremos en 2022 para preservar la paz y la democracia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia Perez. Next, on behalf of the Renew Group, Luis Garicano.
Thanks, Madam President. It's good to see that I'm the fifth speaker and the first man, so that's a good. Just a quick few reactions to your proposals, Madam von der Leyen. I was very happy to hear about this RRF2, this Recovery and Reconstruction Fund, using the lessons from what we learned for Ukraine. That's good news. There was no news on how to finance it, so I hope that's coming. Also, I think that spending on reconstruction is very good, but as you very well said, there are very urgent funding needs, and we need to see how we're going to address them. And third, you mentioned the embargo on oil. This Parliament is really happy to hear that. Congratulations, and that's great news that we are moving on the oil embargo. But as you know, this is far short of what this Parliament wants. We actually asked a month ago for a full embargo on gas and oil. While the debate goes on, the EU has sent to Russia 50 billion euros since the start of the year, 52 billion today. And by the time we get all this oil embargo set, etc., Putin will have received over 100 billion euros more in revenues. We are now in the worst of all worlds. Consumers are paying the higher prices, but these high prices are sufficiently high that Putin gets higher revenues than before, more than compensated for the loss of volume. And some say nothing else can be done, and this is false. There is a clear solution which will collapse Russian revenue, incentivize substitution, protect consumers, and even, Madame von der Leyen, increase EU resources. What is this miracle? It is the oldest trick in the book, a tariff. A tariff on Russian energy would allow us to shift some of the extra revenues from higher gas and oil prices to us, the consumers, from the Russian producers. With a tariff, the price that European consumers pay will go up a little bit. Some consumers will continue consuming, some of them will stop. It depends on how much need they have. But the gap between the price that the consumers pay and what the Russians receive is actually the revenue from the tariff that would flow to the European taxpayers, the European Union, and that could be given back to Europeans to compensate for the higher gas prices. And the suppliers would be the ones facing the trouble, since a lower quantity is going to be supplied, it will be supplied at a lower price. Don't forget that Russian oil and gas suppliers are desperately dependent on European purchases. Between us and our allies, we purchase 80% of the oil and gas, and they will be willing to supply at the lower prices that the tariff will involve for them. Why? First, the EU and us are buying 80% of the fossil fuel exports, and the infrastructure bottlenecks make it very hard to shift those exports to Asia. Second, production costs are low at $20 a barrel, so they will actually have to accept those lower revenues rather than shutting down the wells. In short, a tariff would allow us to shift Russian revenues to the European Union consumers, all while accelerating an end to European dependency on Moscow's fuels. Even if a high tariff comes with a cost for the European Union, it is a more efficient way to stop Putin than any of the other sanctions that we already have in place before the embargo comes in as fast as possible. Let's do it now. It must be a new tool in our armor, enhancing our capacity to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garicano. I now give the floor on behalf of the Green Group to Sarah Mathieu.
Thank you, Chair, Madame la Ministre, Commission President. We've condemned the horrible and unjustified invasion in Ukraine by the Russian military forces many times before. And the European Union was highly united in its response. Severe actions were implemented, and just last plenary, this Parliament demanded an embargo on all Russian fossil fuels, including gas. However, these sanctions will not only harm the Russian economy, they will also affect the lives of European citizens with a direct impact on their homes, their jobs, their wallets. And this could lead to more social inequality, to a rise of unemployment and an increase in energy poverty. We need to protect our citizens, and specifically those at risk of falling into poverty, people that are afraid of not being able to heat their homes next winter. We need a strong social response to their fears. The EU has the choice to leave no one behind, to mitigate the rise in energy costs, to ensure decent and affordable housing for all. The EU has the choice to protect workers on the labour market against unemployment. The EU has the choice to ensure that climate transition is a fair transition where industry pays its fair share. We need minimum wages, minimum income protection for all, and a European unemployment scheme. Colleagues, we have the possibility to protect our citizens against the hardships of war. Well, now is the time to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mathieu. Next, on behalf of the ID Group, Jordan Bardella.
Merci Madame la Présidente de la Commission européenne. Depuis 2 mois, l'horreur de la guerre frappe notre continent. Ce conflit si proche de nos portes nous touche dans nos consciences et nous rappelle à notre devoir de solidarité face aux atrocités et aux crimes de guerre que subit le peuple ukrainien. Mais il touche aussi chacun d'entre nous, chaque peuple d'Europe, par la violence de ses conséquences économiques collatérales. L'inflation est de retour partout en Europe et elle accable d'abord les plus modestes qui voient enchérir les prix des biens de première nécessité. Se nourrir, se chauffer ou encore se déplacer devient hélas pour beaucoup une angoisse toujours plus rude. Cette guerre est d'abord et avant tout un questionnement sur notre dépendance, celle aux énergies fossiles importées comme aux produits alimentaires et aux produits agricoles cultivés toujours plus loin de chez nous. Cette guerre nous rappelle la plus vieille leçon de l'histoire, la souveraineté c'est le prix de la liberté. Dès lors, il est crucial de renforcer notre autonomie énergétique en continuant à renforcer notre filière nucléaire, énergie la plus propre et la plus décarbonée dont disposent aujourd'hui nos sociétés, en refusant de céder aux pressions des Verts qui veulent renvoyer nos sociétés à l'âge de pierre économique par la réouverture des centrales à charbon. Notre devoir est aussi celui de reconquérir notre souveraineté alimentaire par la fin du libre-échange absolu et le développement du juste échange, le recours au circuit court et au localisme, à la proximité. Cette protection de nos filières agricoles passe par la fin de la folle stratégie de la ferme à la fourchette promue par la Commission et qui livre nos agriculteurs à la contrainte et à la ruine. La situation exceptionnelle que nous connaissons appelle à plus court terme des mesures d'urgence pour le pouvoir d'achat de nos concitoyens. Il faut baisser les taxes sur les carburants comme l'a fait la Pologne dès le mois de février. Nous souhaitons le faire en France où les taxes représentent près de 60% du prix à la pompe. Nous devons aussi nous résoudre à constater qu'à cet instant, les sanctions énergétiques prises par l'Europe ont affaibli notre pouvoir d'achat tout en enrichissant la Russie. Le rouble est à un niveau historiquement haut depuis 2 ans et les profiteurs de guerre s'enrichissent toujours plus dans l'exportation des matières premières. Le constructeur automobile Renault a été contraint de céder ses parts dans la marque russe Lada pour un rouble symbolique. C'est donc un institut dépendant de Poutine qui en a fait l'acquisition. Drôle de sanctions qui conduit à saborder une entreprise française pour finalement permettre au gouvernement russe de la nationaliser gratuitement. Alors pour conclure, nous n'avons pas le pouvoir de décider de l'emplacement des gisements de gaz et de pétrole. En revanche, nous pouvons décider de protéger les nôtres tout en sanctionnant les profiteurs de guerre et en aspirant demain à retrouver le chemin de la dépendance. Il faut suivre un principe simple, les sanctions doivent continuer de cibler Poutine, le régime russe et ses décideurs, non le portefeuille des Européens ni les activités de nos entreprises. Je vous conjure de penser à eux. Je vous remercie.
Ask you to think of them. Thank you. Merci. Next, on behalf of the ECR Group, Raffaele Fitto.
Grazie Presidente, Ministro, signora Presidente della Commissione. Ho ascoltato con molta attenzione il suo intervento e penso che sia molto utile e importante questo confronto di idee per individuare delle soluzioni immediate e rapide rispetto all'evoluzione del conflitto. Non c'è dubbio che la strada perseguita è una strada che va portata avanti con decisione rispetto all'atteggiamento nei confronti della Russia, non solamente di condanna ma anche di azione concreta. Quindi il pacchetto di sanzioni è sicuramente l'elemento decisivo sul quale lavorare per ottenere dei risultati, ma il pacchetto di sanzioni è una premessa fondamentale rispetto anche alle reazioni e alle scelte che devono essere fatte in Europa. Noi sappiamo che non hanno una grande popolarità nel nostro continente e che in alcuni paesi rischiano di creare dei grossi problemi. Ed è evidente che servono delle risposte importanti e quindi sicuramente l'obiettivo di lunga scadenza della ricostruzione in Ucraina è fondamentale e fa bene la Commissione ad occuparsene, però oggi dobbiamo anche fare i conti con delle situazioni oggettive. La prima, l'export europeo tra febbraio e marzo ha avuto una flessione del 6%. È necessario dare una risposta forte in tal senso. Il fondo di compensazione, abbiamo un esempio, il modello Brexit utilizzato in quella direzione, può essere una soluzione perché le sanzioni non operano in tutti i paesi nello stesso modo, esistono paesi che ne subiscono maggiormente delle conseguenze rispetto ad altri. Seconda questione, delle scelte di carattere strutturale, lo accennava la collega De Lange rispetto al tema del Fit for 55. È pensabile che noi non modifichiamo nulla rispetto a quanto immaginato prima della guerra. La guerra non è un evento che ci deve portare a riflettere sulla necessità di cambiare l'impostazione che la Commissione e le istituzioni europee hanno messo in campo. Io penso di sì. Quindi i tempi di attuazione, i target troppo ambiziosi che sono presenti all'interno del Fit for 55 sono un elemento decisivo sul quale iniziare una riflessione per modificare queste scelte. E poi un'altra proposta concreta che si accompagna rispetto ad una necessità, una risposta sulle grandi questioni economiche e quindi sul patto di stabilità, un dibattito che viene rinviato ma che dovrebbe essere fondamentale per accompagnare le misure che devono essere portate avanti. Ed è il tema che anche ieri nel dibattito con il primo ministro italiano Draghi abbiamo sollevato. L'articolo 21 del RRF prevede in modo molto chiaro che in casi straordinari questi strumenti che sono con importantissime risorse possono essere modificati rispetto alle esigenze attuali. Ecco, se la Commissione prima della guerra ha previsto un articolo del regolamento che indica la necessità di modificare i piani nazionali per poterli adeguare alle nuove esigenze, io penso che questo tema e che questa sia la circostanza nella quale prendere atto di questo e modificare le scelte in questa direzione per poter immaginare delle soluzioni adeguate in questo senso. E chiudo con un riferimento. E bisogna evitare dei distinguo se vogliamo essere efficaci sulle sanzioni su due elementi fondamentali, acquisti comuni e tetto dell'acquisto dei prezzi del gas. Su questo c'è bisogno di una risposta unitaria. I distinguo non aiutano e rischiano di indebolire complessivamente la strategia che mettiamo in campo. Grazie.
Now on behalf of the Left Group, Martin Schödewan.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Auf den Bahnhöfen in ganz Europa nehmen unzählige freiwillige Millionen Geflüchteter aus der Ukraine in Empfang Menschen, die Schutz, aber auch eine Wohnung, ein Einkommen, einen Job suchen. Millionen von Menschen, die vor einem brutalen Krieg und der Zerstörung ihrer Heimat fliehen. In der Ukraine sind derzeit Millionen Tonnen Getreide blockiert. Die Ernte ist bedroht. In dem Supermarkt bei mir um die Ecke gibt es seit Wochen kein Sonnenblumenöl mehr. Die Preise für Butter sind im letzten Jahr um 44% gestiegen. Die Preise für Gemüse um bis zu 30%. Nahrungsmittelpreise in der EU sind außer Rand und Band. Wegen des Krieges und der Unterbrechung der Lieferketten rechnen die Vereinten Nationen mit einer weltweiten Lebensmittel- und Hungerkrise. Der Krieg fällt in eine Zeit, in der die Energiepreise bereits vor der russischen Invasion in die Ukraine durch die Decke gegangen sind und 36 Millionen Menschen in der EU im Jahr 2020, das sind Ihre Zahlen, Frau von der Leyen, nicht angemessen heizen konnten. Der Krieg, die verstärkte Nachfrage nach der Pandemie, die Spekulation an den Strombörsen und das falsche Energiemarktdesign in der EU tragen zu dieser Energiepreiskostenexplosion bei. All das heizt die Inflation zusätzlich an. Mietkosten steigen, Nahrungsmittelpreise steigen, die Energiepreise steigen weiter, die Inflation frisst Löhne und Renten auf. Und deshalb brauchen wir jetzt einen europaweiten Energiepreisdeckel, damit Energiearmut effektiv bekämpft werden kann und nicht immer weiter aus dem Ruder gerät. Wir brauchen jetzt eine europäische Anstrengung, um die einkommensschwächsten europäischen Haushalte vor Inflation, Energiearmut und Hunger zu schützen. Dafür braucht es eine Krisengewinnsteuer, die erhoben wird auf die zusätzlichen Gewinne der Energiekonzerne, der Rüstungskonzerne. Der Aktienkurs von Rheinmetall ist seit März um 120% gestiegen. Und auch der Pandemiegewinner, also der Pharmaunternehmen und der Big Tech-Konzerne Amazon und Google, haben sich während der Pandemie ja bekanntlich dumm und dämlich verdient. Das wären effektive erste Schritte, um die gröbste soziale Not zu lindern. Und wir würden Gelder freisetzen, die sinnvoller wirtschaftlicher Produktion, der Landwirtschaft und bei der Integration der Kriegsgeflüchteten helfen würden. Es ist wichtig, an der Unabhängigkeit von russischem Gas und Öl zu arbeiten. Deshalb aber Milliarden und Abermilliarden in den Rüstungssektor zu pumpen, halte ich für den falschen Weg, sondern diese Gelder müssen in die sozial gerechte Energiewende fließen, die uns schnellstmöglich von der Abhängigkeit fossiler Energieträger befreit. Und das gilt nicht nur für russisches Gas und Öl, sondern für Gas und Öl, egal woher es stammt. Und einige der verhängten Sanktionen sind leider in der jetzigen Form untauglich. Die Häuser, Yachten, Autos der Oligarchen werden ja quasi eingefroren. Das heißt, sie müssen in demselben Zustand erhalten werden, wie sie vorgefunden werden. Und derzeit zahlen also die europäischen Steuerzahler für die Instandhaltung der eingefrorenen Oligarchen Besitztümer. Ich finde das absurd. Der Besitz muss enteignet werden und anderer Verwendung zugeführt. Oligarchenwillen müssen geflüchteten Familien zur Verfügung gestellt werden, deren Yachten für die Naherholung, hier muss dringend nachgebessert werden, Frau von der Leyen. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schödewan. And now on behalf of the non-attached members, Martin Gyongyeshi.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues, President von der Leyen. There is a broad consensus here and in other EU institutions that economic sanctions on Russia are the most effective way of pressurizing Russia to stop its aggression in the Ukraine. The speed, the efficiency and accuracy of the sanctions proposed by the Commission need to be commended, especially its efforts to create an unprecedented unity among member states. It is unfortunate that it took such a disaster to realize the unhealthy dependence of our continent on Russian energy supplies and start discussions about a unified energy market based on diversified energy resources and solidarity among member states. In the past weeks, Russia has demonstrated that it's ready to use energy as a strategic weapon to further its aggressive geopolitical objectives. It must be clear by now that Russia in the long term is an unreliable partner for supplying energy to the EU. Therefore, I would like to ask the Commission not only to focus on fossil fuels when it comes to sanctions, but also target nuclear energy. Nuclear deals struck by Russian Rosatom with various governments of various member states must be phased out. Finland showed the way by terminating the Fennovoima deal with Rosatom that supplied a nuclear reactor, was the financial backer of the project and the main shareholder. It's time that Hungary follows suit and terminates its equally controversial PACS deal with Rosatom. The Commission would be right in its next sanction package to ban every Russian nuclear deal on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Sigrid Muresan.
Thank you, Mr. President, President von der Leyen, dear colleagues. We have all seen Russia is a threat for the security of the European Union and will remain a threat for us for the foreseeable future. This is why we can only live in safety and stability within the borders of the European Union if we are surrounded in our immediate neighborhood by countries who are safe and stable. Helping Ukraine clearly means also helping ourselves. This is why the line needs to be continue supporting Ukraine, sanctioning the Russian Federation. President von der Leyen, we are welcoming the new package of sanctions which you presented to us, which you are putting forward. We as a parliament have demanded an immediate ban on imports of Russian oil, gas, coal and nuclear fuel. This is why, as the Commission will be implementing the ban on Russian oil, it has to be implemented, it has to take effect as soon as possible and in a way in which it does not allow for any loopholes and special treatments for member states, for companies, because this would endanger the unity of the European Union. Keeping our unity as we are also implementing this ban will be important, firstly. Secondly, as we reduce our dependency on Russian fossil fuels, we should not create dependencies on any other single route of transport, single source of energy or supplying country. We are seeing that any vulnerability, any weakness costs in times of crisis. What should we do within the European Union? Because the title of the debate is Social and Economic Consequences for the European Union. Firstly, we should use the existing tools which we have to strengthen our economy. There is still money available in the Recovery and Resilience Facility because some member states have not accessed all of the loans component. We need to work with member states to see if they need the money, if they will access it, and if not, the position of our group of the EPP is to try to use those amounts for large energy projects, transnational energy projects to interconnect, to bring energy to where it is needed within the European Union. If an amendment of the RRF regulation is needed for this, we should do it. Next point, use the decommitted amounts from the budget 2014-2020 to allow member states to spend the money on where they need it, particularly in helping refugees and host communities within the borders of the EU. And one last idea which helps Ukraine and helps the European Union is work towards integrating Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova into the EU single market as soon as circumstances allows. This will help Ukraine to develop by its own, with the cost being more controllable for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Und das Wort hat nun Frau Agnes Jongerius.
I give the floor to Agnes Jongerius.
Thank you, Chair. And colleagues, the title of the debate is the social economic consequences for the EU of the Russian war in the Ukraine. And of course, the consequences in the Ukraine are huge. But I think we should also be clear that the war in Ukraine plunges us also in a new socio-economic crisis. And with skyrocketing energy prices, with deep diving purchasing power, and with increasing inflation, I fear that the most vulnerable will bear the burden. And the question should be then, I think, what route are we going to take? It's our duty that the strongest shoulders bear the heaviest burden. While standing up against Putin and standing in solidarity with the Ukraine, in this crisis, we need to address the root causes of the long-term economic and social imbalances. I think it's time to break the vicious circle of raising inequalities and privilege for the super rich. There are many things to fix, and those who are increasing their profits exponentially and indecently are the ones who pay the price first. And therefore we need more than just an extension of the escape clause. We need a European solution. We need money to accommodate the refugees from the Ukraine. We need support for the citizens and small businesses for rising energy prices. Madam Minister, I think we should not talk about energy poverty anymore. We are talking about actual poverty, people who cannot pay their bills anymore. And therefore, my proposal is to organize a social summit with the social partners to tackle the challenges of increasing inflation, increasing inequalities and its social consequences, especially on the living conditions and wages. We need to update the action plan of the social pillar. We need European action. Thank you.
Merci. Madame Valérie Ayer, you are the next one.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President.
Monsieur le Commissaire, Madame la Ministre, chers collègues.
Madam Minister, colleagues.
Chaque jour qui passe, nous
Every
envoyons
day that passes,
800 millions d'euros à
we are
Poutine grâce à
sending
nos achats de pétrole,
billions of
de
euros
gaz et de
to
charbon.
Putin through coal,
Ces
gas
800
and
millions, ils
oil
lui permettent de nourrir
purchases.
ses soldats et de recharger ses tanks.
These hundreds of millions
Tant que
allow
nous
him
continuerons, les
to
horreurs
pay
ne
his
s'arrêteront pas.
soldiers and decrease
Alors
his
oui,
military
nous
spending.
devons asphyxier cette économie de guerre
We
et
have
non pas
to
l'alimenter.
put an end to this war
Mais
economy
Monsieur le
and
Commissaire,
not feed it
il est
further.
illusoire de croire que
Commissioner,
les Européens sortiront indemnes de cette situation s'il n'y a
we
aucune
can't
solidarité
imagine that
avec ceux qui seront
the
les plus impactés.
EU can
J'en suis même
get through this
convaincue,
without
c'est
suffering
la
any pain
condition
and without
pour aller plus loin.
solidarity.
Nous devons
So
donc
we need
mutualiser
to
les
go
coûts de
further.
cette guerre
We should be
pour nos ménages,
mutualising
pour
the
nos
costs of
entreprises.
this war for our
Si nous imposons des sanctions en
companies, for our
européen,
citizens.
nous devons en
If we are
assumer
imposing
aussi
sanctions, then we
les
have to
conséquences en européen.
take the necessary consequences at the
c'est
European
peut-être
level.
une chose.
That's not all.
Anticiper les problèmes pour qu'ils ne surgissent pas
Trying to
en est une.
respond is one
Alors, chers
thing,
collègues,
but trying to
prenons
preempt
du recul.
future developments is another. Let's take a
Serions-nous
step back.
autant à la merci de Vladimir Poutine si nous avions
Are we
entrepris
going
les
to
investissements
continue to
nécessaires
be
il y a
at
8
the
ans?
mercy of
Il y a 8 ans,
Vladimir
lorsque l'Ukraine a été
Putin? If we had
amputée de la
taken the
Crimée,
choice 8 years ago
est-ce
when
que l'histoire n'aurait pas
Moscow
été
entered
complètement différente
Crimea,
aujourd'hui?
wouldn't
Si
the
nous étions
story have
sortis
been
de nos
very different
dépendances aux
today? If we had
hydrocarbures
been
russes,
stronger, if we
et
had
même aux
got
hydrocarbures tout
away
court?
from our dependence on
Oui, il y a eu des erreurs
Russian
stratégiques
hydrocarbons
qui ont
and
été commises ces dernières
hydrocarbons
années.
in general, I think that would have changed things
Cette
significantly.
invasion et ses
That's
conséquences
incontestable.
doivent donc sonner comme
This
l'alerte
invasion
ultime.
and its consequences
Alors je rappelle ici ma et notre conviction.
are our
Nous
last
devons créer
warning.
SAFE, un
So,
fonds pour notre
yes,
autonomie
we do need to
stratégique en
create
Europe,
SAFE,
un fonds
a
destiné à
fund for our
sortir de nos
strategic
dépendances
economy in Europe.
d'ici à
We
la
need
fin
to
de
get
la
out of our
décennie.
dependence
Hydrocarbures,
by
un
the end of the
transagricole,
decade.
industrie critique,
When we're
défense
talking
aussi,
about critical
évidemment.
industries,
Il est de
defense,
notre responsabilité
hydrocarbons,
d'enfin nous affirmer,
agricultural
d'enfin prendre
inputs,
notre destin en main.
we need to
Nous
take the
avons
necessary
été élus, chers
consequences,
collègues,
seize our
pour faire de
destiny.
l'Europe une union qui protège.
We have to make
Les temps
Europe
présents nous
a
obligent.
Europe that
Je vous
protects.
remercie.
Time will not forgive us if we don't.
Merci. Excuse me, monsieur. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Ernest Utterson.
Thank you, Chair, Commission, Council. Let me first welcome the President von der Leyen announcement on the ban to Russian oil to be included in the new sanctions package. This support to Ukraine needs to go hand in hand also in supporting our citizens most affected from the consequences of war. We are at the doors of possibly the third once-in-a-lifetime deep crisis that generations of Europeans will suffer. The cumulative crises have led to devastating social consequences in our continent. 96 million people in the EU are already at risk of poverty. Increased inequalities, the return of war in Europe, and the existential threat of climate change is a scary prospect. And once again, history knocks at the doors of the European project. During the pandemic, the EU learned how to respond to difficult economic and social situations after the disastrous years of the authoritarian lunacy. Now we need to show that this willingness to protect our citizens will be the norm and not the exception. Price inflation in the EU has reached levels not seen since the 70s, but half, we know, is directly due to fossil energy price rises. And it is why we need action on the energy sector. It is not time, in our opinion, to restrict our accommodative monetary policy, which would have disastrous economic consequences, but to accelerate our energy transition. And it is not time either, I'm sorry to say, to postpone our Green New Deal. I mean, climate change does not wait, and we know that our Green Deal and energy transition is the best solution to the crisis that we are having, so I cannot more than disagree with what the EPP has said this morning today in the plenary. We know that we need to accelerate that energy transition, and for that, we will probably need also no financial instruments to be put in place. That is why we want also to call for a new energy sovereignty facility to facilitate member states to accelerate that transition. We know that politically this is difficult. Putting in place the RRF was a difficult process, but we need to be ambitious, and I'm sure that we will be able to do that again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Jörg Madison.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Mr. Commissioner, Councillor. First of all, I was checking yesterday morning about the statistic that how much have you paid to Russia for the gas and oil and for the coal. And in the first 2 months after the war, the biggest buyer and the payer for Russia is, of course, Germany. The second one is Italy. The third one is Turkey, and the fourth one is Netherlands. And if I compared the prices, what we paid, I mean we as Europeans, what we paid to Russia for the gas and oil, it was 3 times higher amount of money than it was exactly on the same time in last year. And, of course, the Germans and others who are buying the gas from Russia, they're saying it's the market price. But the problem today now, what we have is that we, as Europeans, are paying 3 times more money to Russia, and we are saying that, well, it's a market price, but it's not true. The Russians are saying, you have to pay this amount of money for the gas, otherwise we will not sell it. And we are not the smartest ones, and we are paying this money. So it means that every day we are paying hundreds of millions of euros to Russia to have the energy resources, and they are using this money for the military and for the war machine against Ukraine, maybe tomorrow against Moldova, maybe in a few days against Baltic states or against Finland. So what is my point? We have now in a situation, and now the summer is coming, so it's the good time, but it's September, October, November, when the winter is coming. We will be again in the situation where we are paying many, many times more money for the resources, for the energy from Russia to have a warm house, to have functioning technology, to have functioning businesses. And that's why today the Germans and Austrians and also Hungarians, unfortunately, have to say, unfortunately, they are saying that, no, we can't stop now the import for the energy from Russia. But we have to think now how to survive next winter, because otherwise we will be screwed. And otherwise we are still paying more and more money, 3 times more than last year to Russia, and this money will be used for the new occupations, for the new expansions, and that's the fault of the European energy policy. We have to learn from the mistakes, what we have done, and look for the next winter. Thanks so much.
Danke.
Thank you.
Und das Wort hat Frau Beata.
The next speaker will be Mrs. Beata Szydło. 2 minutes 30.
Panie Przewodniczący, Szanowna Pani Minister,
Minister,
Komisarze, szanowni koleżanki i koledzy. Nie da się ludzkiego życia przeliczyć na pieniądze. Nie da się przeliczyć na pieniądze życia ukraińskich dzieci, kobiet, mężczyzn. Ale pieniądze są potrzebne po to, żeby móc ich ratować, żeby ich wspierać, żeby pomagać im bronić się i żeby pomagać im przetrwać ten tragiczny dla nich wszystkich czas. Dlatego nie bójmy się podejmować odważnych decyzji. Niech nie przemawia przez nas tylko i wyłącznie w tej chwili takie myślenie, że konsekwencje tej wojny odbiją się też na nas wszystkich. Tak, one się odbiją na nas wszystkich, ale im szybciej ta wojna się skończy, im szybciej powstrzymamy Putina, tym będzie po prostu możliwszy szybszy pokój i wyjście z tej tragicznej sytuacji na Ukrainie. Potrzebne są zdecydowane kroki, konsekwencja, stanowczość i solidarność. Dobrze, że jest szósty pakiet sankcji, mogę powiedzieć, zbyt późno i oby był skuteczny i obyśmy mogli powiedzieć na następnej sesji tutaj, na następnej naszej debacie, że ten
Strasbourg, we will be able to say that this package is effective,
odnieść wrażenie, że próbowane były, podejmowane były decyzje, ale nie do końca one były realizowane. Żeby zatrzymać Putina, musimy być zdecydowani i musimy przede wszystkim być konsekwentni i odważni. Dzisiaj Unia Europejska potrzebuje bardzo tej odwagi. Nie bójmy się. Nie bójmy się powstrzymywać Putina. Nie bójmy się tego, żeby zdecydowanie powiedzieć dość. Wyciągnijmy konsekwencje i wyciągnijmy przede wszystkim wnioski z tych zaniechęć, które przez poprzednie lata tutaj w Unii były niestety podejmowane. Jeszcze jedna rzecz, szanowni państwo. Ci ludzie, którzy trafiają do naszych krajów, potrzebują pomocy. A te państwa, które ich wspierają, potrzebują środków z Unii Europejskiej. Powiedziałam, że nie da się przeliczyć życia ludzkiego na pieniądze, ale żeby im pomóc, te pieniądze są potrzebne. Dlatego trzeba stworzyć na wzór tego funduszu, który był kiedyś w czasie kryzysu migracyjnego, kiedy przyjeżdżali do Europy migranci ekonomiczni. Trzeba stworzyć specjalny fundusz, który pomoże państwom ratującym dzisiaj Ukrainę.
Thank you. Das Wort hat Herr Nikolai Willumsen gebeten.
The next speaker will be Mr. Nikolai Willumsen.
Krigen i Ukraine er dybt forfærdelig. Vi skal gøre alt for at stoppe den, for at hjælpe ukrainerne. Det er vigtigt, at EU har indført sanktioner, men de er tydeligvis ikke hårde nok til at få Putin til at trække sine soldater tilbage. Derfor må vi øge presset. Vi skal stoppe import af russisk olie og gas. Vi skal ramme Putin og oligarkerne, hvor det gør ondt. Krigen og solidariteten med Ukraine
and solidarity with Ukraine will also affect our own economy. Therefore, it is vital that we protect our low-income families. This is also part of our fight against Putin, because the broadest shoulders, of course, need to carry the heaviest loads. It is tragic that so many families are struggling to make ends meet and need to choose between food or heating. That's not the way it should be in the EU in 2022. Nobody should starve or be forced to leave their home. We need to protect the weakest in our society. It is vital if we are to stand together against Putin. Let us tax the excessive abnormal profits. Let's stop the speculation in increasing food, energy and raw material prices. Let us help the Ukrainian refugees. The Ukrainian refugees are welcome in the EU. And like all other refugees, they deserve to be treated well. also by the labour market. Therefore, we need to make clear demands on the employers so that our Ukrainian friends are not paid below normal levels or misused in other ways. Therefore, we need clear social demands for payouts on EU funds. And our taxpayers' money should not go to companies that do not stick to collective agreements or who hide in tax havens. EU money should not go to greedy employers or rich people who let down the community. Dear colleagues, let's instead stand together against Putin. Let's protect low-income families, and let's stand in solidarity in this terrible war. Thank you.
Danke.
Thank you. And now the next speaker will be Mr. Ludek Niedermayer.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues, dear guests. A cruel, illegal and irresponsible attack of Putin Russia on Ukraine has killed so far thousands of people, brought full-scale war to Europe's territory, and destroyed remaining naive trust to a rule-based relationship with Russia. Economic and social implications are only part of this, as Esther has mentioned in her speech, but this is the part that shouldn't be neglected. We are dealing with a difficult combination of high inflation that will be boosted by the war, the implication for some member states of high inflow of refugees, as well as disruption of the businesses for firms that had ties with Russia or Ukraine. Lack of public confidence is only completing the picture. Most of the economic forecasts are still assuming very moderate impact on economic growth in the magnitude just slightly above 1%. This is something that we can deal about, but these assumptions are based on the condition that there is no disruption of energy supply to Europe. We should also have in mind that the impact is not equally spread. Anyway, we must take some policy action. This should be fact-based, but should be effective and quick. First, we must get ready for interruption of the gas supply. Every day, Moscow can decide to cut the supply. Better preparation means that the damaging cost will be lower. Secondly, I guess it's economically rational to react with domestic social and economic policy, especially on high energy prices. But at the same time, instead of building temporary permanent support mechanism, we should speed up introduction of renewables and energy efficiency. We must make sure that we will reduce the red tapes and any other measures that are slowing down the economy. More economic growth means also lower unemployment and smaller problems of the fiscal policy. Last but not least, we must redirect EU funds to deal with the current challenges and use the sources that we have effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jonas Fernandez, the floor is yours.
Buenos días. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Good morning. Thank you, President.
Consejo.
Council.
Me gustaría empezar este debate felicitando a la Comisión Europea por el nuevo paquete que ha presentado esta mañana y sin duda por el trabajo de liderazgo en la toma de decisiones para ayudar a Ucrania y bloquear las intenciones de Putin. Yo creo que este trabajo hay que reconocerlo y esperemos que el Consejo siga manteniendo la unidad.
We hope that Council will maintain the unity that we've seen in past months.
Algunas desviaciones o algunas propuestas no encuentren apoyo y seamos capaces de minimizar esas probabilidades de desviación dentro del Consejo. En todo caso, el debate sobre los efectos en la Unión Europea es un debate complejo, porque sin duda tiene aspectos sociales, como se han expuesto. Tenemos que acoger a ese conjunto, esos millones de refugiados que han llegado a Europa, y además también consecuencias económicas de no fácil tratamiento, con una inflación elevada y con unas previsiones de crecimiento difíciles. En todo caso, este espíritu de consenso que veo en este Parlamento, teniendo en cuenta que la gran mayoría de las medidas hasta ahora están siendo tomadas por los Estados miembros, contrasta con algunos congresos, con algunos parlamentos nacionales como el de mi país, donde la derecha parece no querer respaldar al gobierno en estos momentos difíciles. En todo caso, necesitamos que la política monetaria no responda de manera acelerada a este crecimiento de la inflación, el grueso de la desviación de precios es alimentos y energía, a diferencia de lo que ocurre en Estados Unidos, por ejemplo. Y también sería bueno reconsiderar el papel del ARAREF, la posibilidad de ampliar o de generar nuevos instrumentos similares al ARAREF para responder económicamente de manera solidaria, a la vez que las propias sanciones también las tomamos de manera conjunta. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Herr Kollege Dragos Pislariou, you are the next one.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Commissioner, Madame la Ministre Clinton, we have spent the past 2 years talking about how to emerge from the COVID-19 crisis stronger. We have spent 2 months of war in Ukraine doing the same. A crisis has this green gift of providing ample supplies of one of the most elusive and valuable resources Europe needs, the political will to embrace change and to do the things that need to be done. I applaud the continuation of the sanctions, but we are still far away from the Parliament position. We still need ambitious tools and the instruments to move forward. In the pandemic, we have created the RRF and other funds and measures that showed solidarity, that kept our businesses, sometimes barely afloat, and helped our citizens. Now, in 2 months, we have moved defense supplies of an unprecedented scale and opened our countries to many more millions of Ukrainian refugees that we had seen during the 2015 refugee crisis. We do have right now a momentum of political will to reinforce our capacity to act for all Europeans, Ukrainians included, as they firmly belong in Europe by culture, values, geography, and now by bravery and commitment. I think it is time, indeed, to use the RRF at its full potential, to use all the resources, to use all the lessons learned and the solutions for the member states, and this is part of the response. But at the same time, we should focus indeed, and I was really pleased to hear today that there is a discussion about the recovery plan from Ukraine. And for that, we need indeed to use the lessons learned from the RRF that are indeed valuable. The world will never be the same again, and a Russia with Putin in charge will never again be a partner for Europe. So there is no more status quo to return to, and we need to create a new normal, one with reinforced financial tools that will ensure no European is left behind in the aftermath of Putin's war, and Ukraine and Moldova as well get welcome their need from the EU, and that we emerge once again stronger together. Thank you.
Frau Kollegin Terry Reintke, Sie sind die nächste Rednerin.
Terry Reintke, you're the next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, dear Commissioner, dear Minister, the President is right. European history will be written in Ukraine. That is why our support for a free European democracy against the brutal Russian aggression is paramount right now. And it is our historic responsibility to do everything possible to show this solidarity, including hard and far-reaching sanctions. And I'm happy to hear that a deal has been reached on a ban of Russian oil. It is an important next step, but it is certainly not the last one that we will need. And while this Parliament strongly supports the sanctions, we also already see the negative consequences this war has for Europe. After years of pandemic, we see the economic struggle of many households in the European Union. And our reaction to the pandemic, despite some challenges in the beginning, was based on one of our strongest assets, solidarity. With the Next Generation EU Fund, we managed to show that we can stand together in times of crisis. And the same, and probably more, is needed now. Because we all know what Putin is trying to do. He's trying to divide us, to play member state against member state, and to count that the social hardship that we will face will dry out our firm support for Ukraine. Putin is trying to divide Europe, to divide our societies. He's counting on our inability to manage this great challenge together. We cannot, colleagues, and we will not let him succeed in this. Let us show that we will face this challenge together, the East and the West of Europe, the North and the South. Let us show that all that he's succeeding in will be to revive the European social model, the promise of a European Union where nobody will be left behind. For that, we will need joint efforts, investments, a solidarity fund to balance out the social inequality. And we will have to proceed in creating a real social safety net on the European level by finally introducing a European minimum wage, closing the gender pay gap, and yes, also a European minimum income. This continent is weakest when it's divided and strongest when it is united. Let us be united against Putin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Unser nächster Sprecher Marco Campomenosi.
Next speaker is Marco Campomenosi. 2 minutes 30.
Grazie Presidente, grazie
Commissario
per essere qui.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here with us.
Le conseguenze come se ci sono per il tessuto sociale e produttivo dei paesi dell'Unione Europea, ma ovviamente c'è anche l'elemento positivo del fatto che siamo tutti uniti.
However, the positive side is that we are all united. We're supporting the
che è uno
sanctions
strumento
and the new
giusto e che
package.
sta portando dei risultati. Certo, sta portando anche delle conseguenze, dei costi al nostro sistema, al nostro modello di impresa, ma occorre andare avanti perché è una delle strategie più importanti. L'unità che abbiamo dimostrato qui è un valore, però non ci deve impedire di fare anche un'analisi sulla situazione che si sta creando, un'analisi anche sugli errori che abbiamo commesso nel passato, sul perché siamo giunti a questa dipendenza dalla Russia, sul perché fino a poche settimane prima dello scoppio della guerra qualcuno in quest'Aula continuava a difendere progetti come il Nord Stream 2 e sull'ISMED invece non si diceva nulla. Progetto, quello dell'ISMED, che magari rilanceremo presto ma che impiegherà molto tempo a diventare attivo. Abbiamo alcuni elementi che sono sorti in queste settimane, il problema dello stoccaggio delle risorse energetiche in vista del prossimo inverno, la questione del pagamento con i rubli o con l'euro, per cui le imprese hanno bisogno di chiarimenti, quindi sarebbe importante che la Commissione europea dia elementi di chiarezza anche su questo aspetto che sta creando delle tensioni che sono anche sui mercati. L'inflazione, il potere d'acquisto delle famiglie è stato già citato anche dai miei colleghi, perché in fondo poi quello che è in gioco è la competitività del nostro sistema. L'agroalimentare sta subendo già le conseguenze e il lavoro e il nostro tessuto sociale rischia di pagare molto caro. Poi magari le conseguenze non le dovremmo gestire noi, ma i nostri colleghi deputati e a livello nazionale e regionale. Però quello sarà un elemento importantissimo, perché aggiungo quello che è stato detto anche da altri miei colleghi, non dobbiamo però commettere l'errore con il patto di stabilità di tornare a norme sbagliate che hanno fatto sì che l'Europa fosse il continente cresciuto meno negli ultimi 20 anni, e con il Fit for 55 aggiungere costi a imprese, costi che vengono da norme studiate addirittura per un'Europa pre-pandemia. Figuriamoci per un'Europa come quella di oggi che vive una guerra drammatica alle sue porte. Grazie e speriamo di poter porre qualche correttivo.
Thank you very much.
Ich bitte Herrn Robert Roos zum Rednerpult.
Robert Roos would be the next speaker.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Minister, commissaris, collega's.
Commissioner,
de sociale en economische gevolgen
van de Ukrainian war
Laten we wel duidelijk zijn. De torenhoge inflatie komt voor het grootste gedeelte niet door de oorlog in Oekraïne. Die was er al. Dankzij het monetaire beleid van de onafrekenbare ECB, die de geldpersen al jaren in recordtempo laat drukken. Dankzij onze overheden die de economie hebben stilgelegd met ellenlange lockdowns. have also crippled our economy with lockdown. And then there's the Green Deal from the EU, which is leading to inflation and increasing the cost of energy and food. But through the war, energy prices have gone even higher. And this is a fundamental factor in the economy and part of our welfare. I think it is clear that Russia attacked Ukraine. And I understand very well why we want to do something to protest against that. I pleaded for EU union against Russian, but we have to make sure the sanctions are working. Are they having the desired effect on Russia? And now we're going to go further with a new round of energy sanctions, not just because of the rising energy prices. Russia is increasing. The prices have increased as a result sanction. And the world is bigger than the EU. And if we're importing gas, there's more strain on the economy. And people, we need to stop shooting ourselves in the foot. It is a time for politicians to look at the welfare of our citizens, and I just want to say that Russia is getting rich and Europe is moving into poverty, and we need to have a solution. We need to get people around the negotiating table, and that needs efforts by Ukraine and the EU. Thank you.
Das Wort hat nun Frau Pereira.
Next speaker is Mrs. Lydia Pereira.
Mr. President, fellow Europeans, war is at our gates. Europeans are suffering with fuel prices on the rise, with food prices, particularly bread and other essentials, going through the roof. In fact, many Europeans are facing difficulties to which we cannot turn our faces in denial. But we need to face the social and economic consequences of this war, not only inside the EU, but also in Ukraine. We must not just walk or talk the talk, we must do the walk. We must reinforce our capacity to walk the walk, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. We must not settle for a few good speeches and beautiful words and loads of indignity in social media. We must do what we can do as soon as we can to make sure that something like this does not happen again. We need a legal freeze and seize instrument. We need to make Russia pay for war reparations to Ukraine. And we need that money. We need to help creating an adequate recovery plan to rebuild Ukraine's infrastructure and relaunch Ukraine's economy. We can be divided into many things, and we frequently are. After all, debate and discussion are what a parliament is about. But dear friends, we cannot be divided about defending Europe from autocratic regimes. We shall not be divided about responding to other countries blackmailing us. And we will not be divided about putting European security, solidarity and friendship above anything else. Long live Europe and long live freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Ich bitte nun Herrn Pedro Marques.
The next speaker will be Pedro Marques.
Vielen Dank, Presidente, Ministre, caro Vice-Presidente da Comissão Europeia. A guerra bárbara da Ucrânia, da Rússia à Ucrânia convoca toda a nossa solidariedade com os ucranianos, agora e no futuro. Adotamos por isso vários pacotes de sanções que enfraqueceram o regime e a economia russa, reduzindo a sua capacidade de alimentar a máquina de guerra, mas têm também impacto na Europa e nos nossos cidadãos. Em qualquer caso, é um preço que nós, europeus, estamos dispostos a suportar em nome da paz e da liberdade. E, caro Vice-Presidente da Comissão Europeia, queria cumprimentar a Comissão pelo novo pacote de sanções que agora vão adotar, que vai ao encontro de propostas deste Parlamento Europeu. Gostávamos que avançássemos mais depressa, mas reconhecemos que o embargo ao petróleo afeta significativamente a economia russa e o regime de Putin. Mas temos também uma mensagem clara para transmitir à Comissão e às outras instituições e ao Conselho. É que a nossa capacidade de nos mantermos unidos na resposta à agressão russa também depende da capacidade de gerir as consequências económicas e sociais aqui na Europa. E à medida que aumentamos as sanções sobre a Rússia, também sabemos que as contrasanções e o efeito dos preços da energia na Europa afetam a nossa economia, afetam os nossos cidadãos. E queremos manter, de facto, a unidade europeia porque tem sido um grande valor na resposta à agressão russa. E para isso temos, de facto, que apoiar os cidadãos e as empresas europeias. Muitas e boas ideias já foram hoje aqui apresentadas, outras menos boas, relativamente a esta resposta europeia. Devemos, de facto, continuar a avançar fortemente para as energias renováveis, devemos apoiar as nossas empresas que estão a ser afetadas pelos preços da energia, mas não as multinacionais do setor energético que estão a ter lucros obscenos, devem ser taxados, e devemos certamente apoiar os cidadãos que estão a sofrer da pobreza energética, do efeito da pobreza energética, e todos aqueles que estão a apoiar os refugiados que vieram ao nosso encontro. Essa solidariedade aqui na Europa significa defender a Europa, defender os ucranianos, defendendo também os povos europeus.
Danke. Unsere nächste Sprecherin ist Frau Vizepräsidentin Nicola Beer.
Herr Präsident, Madame la Ministre, Monsieur le Commissaire. Europa bewegt sich weiter. Endlich ist auch ein Ölembargo in greifbarer Nähe. Wir verlassen endlich auch im Energiebereich unsere Komfortzone. Wir Europäer müssen diesen Schritt gehen. Alleine der erhobene europäische Zeigefinger wird den russischen Angriffskrieg nicht beenden. Nach den bisherigen Sanktionspaketen, nach den Entscheidungen zu Waffenlieferungen ist das Ölembargo die überfällige geopolitische Entscheidung, mit der Europa seiner Verantwortung, seinem Gewicht, seinen Möglichkeiten gerecht wird. Die europäische Glaubwürdigkeit an der Seite der Ukraine gegen den russischen Aggressor bekommt bis dato eine neue Qualität, die ich in der letzten Zeit schmerzlich vermisst habe. Aber kostenlose Glaubwürdigkeit, liebe Kollegen, gibt es nicht. Das Energieembargo wird an Europa nicht spurlos vorübergehen. Trotz der Übergangsfristen wird es voraussichtlich Preisschocks für Verbraucherinnen und Verbraucher, für die Industrie, wird es Versorgungsengpässe von Portugal bis Polen geben. Einfach wird es wahrlich nicht. Ersatz für russisches Öl, ja, Ersatz ist zu höheren Preisen wird zu haben. Ja, es wird Einschnitte geben, aber tragen wir sie mit Fassung. Seien wir bereit, diese Preise zu zahlen, liebe Kollegen, die Europäische Union ist in der Lage, die unausweichlichen Folgen für Verbraucher, für die Industrie zu tragen, sie abzumildern. Wir dürfen dabei auch nicht vergessen, dass es andere Regionen, andere Kontinente gibt, die diese Sachen nicht so einfach tragen können, die nicht eine Komfortzone haben, aus der sie herausrücken können. Auch diese müssen wir im Blick behalten. Dabei dürfen wir trotzdem nicht wanken, nicht weichen. Wir dürfen uns vor allem nicht von den Einschüchterungsversuchen Putins in irgendeiner Weise beeindrucken lassen. Europa kann, Europa muss es jetzt tun, wenn wir uns von der Geschichte am Ende nicht vorwerfen lassen wollen, vor lauter Kleingedruckten das Wort Krieg nicht mehr lesen zu können. Wir haben uns schon viel zu viel Zeit gelassen mit den AGBs von Krieg und Frieden. Es ist der 70. Kriegstag. Gewöhnen wir uns nicht an die Gräuel der Ukraine. Alle möglichen Unterstützung. Sie kämpft auch für unsere Freiheit. Weisen wir Russland in die Schranken, und zwar jetzt.
Danke. Frau Kollegin Monier, Herr Kollege Monier Sartori,
the next speaker.
Madame la Ministre, Monsieur le Commissaire, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, alors que l'Ukraine fait face aux pires heures de son histoire, l'Europe doit être et rester solidaire de ce peuple agressé. Pour faire face et pour soigner ses propres maux, l'Europe et ses États membres doivent aussi renforcer leur solidarité interne, leur solidarité sociale. Nous devons empêcher la guerre de Vladimir Poutine de créer de la casse sociale dans l'Union européenne, car les Européennes et les Européens sont confrontés à une précarité énergétique accrue et à l'inflation. Le droit au logement, comme le droit à l'alimentation, doivent être garantis. Nous en avons les moyens. Mobilisons les fonds nécessaires au pouvoir de vivre. La crise que nous traversons doit amener l'Union à faire face
This crisis should bring the European Union to question and to change its social policies to protect the most vulnerable. We have to act in a united manner against the consequences of this crisis on the, and its impact on the social arena and unemployment. And so this is why I call upon the French presidency of the Council to show how ambitious it is when it comes to the draft directive on the minimum wage that is currently being negotiated. A minimum wage has to ensure decent living standards for all workers. I also call for a joint initiative to ensure a minimum income.
Cette guerre nous met après la Covid, après des années de précarisation, devant une urgence sociale encore plus criante. Notre Europe, notre Union doit y répondre en renforçant de manière concrète ses politiques sociales.
We have to act in a practical manner to strengthen our social policies. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank. Zu Wort gemeldet hat sich unser Kollege Ivan Stefanic.
Ďakujem pekne, dámy a páni, kolegyne a kolegovia. Už tretí mesiac čelia statoční Ukrajinci zločineckej ruskej vojenskej agresii a bránia slobodu nielen vo svojej vlasti, ale aj v celej Európe. Pred pár týždňami som sa mal možnosť zúčastniť takisto návštevy Kyjeva, Buče, Irpinu na podnet môjho kolegu Andrusa Kubiliusa. Videl som hrôzy vojny priamo na mieste. Napríklad v Buči, kde nie je jediný vojenský objekt, ruskí zločinci útočili od prvého dňa invázie na civilné obyvateľstvo. Videl som masové hroby, videl som detské hračky pred zbombardovanými domami, diery v domoch po ruských raketách. Proste hrôzy, na ktoré sa nedá zabudnúť. A je šokujúce, že ruský vojenský zločinec Putin
And also it's absurd that the war criminal Putin is honoring these war criminals for their acts. What Russians see as heroism, all normal people see as a primitive crime. And crimes should not be honored, they should be punished. I therefore welcome the penalties for these criminals and also I welcome the new sanctions package. I also welcome the inclusion of the Russian disinformation channel in the new sanction package. For years we've been inactive against Russian propaganda. It's high time for us to act now. But we need to go even further in order to protect life in Europe. We need to de-Russify Europe. Let's not be afraid. Let's cut off our dependence on Russian energy. Some countries are very dependent, including my country, Slovakia. I therefore understand all the worries. But the solution is in finding a common approach, in building a common market, in energy, in joint purchasing. There are solutions. So we need to protect freedom, we need to protect human life and dignity, just as Christian Democrats have done in Europe. It is all the more valuable today. We need to see their acts as an example, as a role model. By helping Ukrainians, we will help ourselves. Human life has more value than any money in the world.
Thank you. Zu Wort gemeldet hat sich Frau Elsi Katainen.
Elsi Katainen.
Kiitoksia puhemies, hyvä komissaari. Venäjän hyökkäyssota Ukrainaan on Euroopan unionin historian kenties suurin koetinkivi. Yhteisömme on rakennettu luomaan rauhaa ja nyt sen perustaa uhataan rajuimmalla mahdollisella tavalla sitten toisen maailmansodan. Euroopassa riehuu sota, Venäjä pyrkii jokaisella liikkeellään hajottamaan unionia. Mistä Bulgarian ja Puolan kaasuhanojen sulkeminen on ihan uusin viimeisin osoitus. Vetoan jokaiseen päättäjään Euroopassa katsomaan historian pitkää kaarta ja tekemään lopun Venäjän energian tuonnille. Tästä seuraa taloudellisia haasteita, mutta Euroopan moraalisen kantin pitää kestää nämä seuraukset. Emme voi hyväksyä invaasiota, verilöylyjä ja lastensairaalojen pommituksia. EU:n on pystyttävä pysymään yhtenäisenä ja yhtenäisiin päätöksiin. Sodan sosiaaliset ja taloudelliset vaikutukset iskevät jokaiseen eurooppalaiseen. Yli 5 miljoonaa ukrainalaista on menettänyt kotinsa ja EU on autettava heitä. Energian hinnan nousu vaikuttaa myös ruokamarkkinoihin. Ilmastokomissaari Timmermansin arviot siitä, että EU:ssa ei ole eikä tule olemaan ruokakriisiä, ovat käsittämättömiä. Paras lääke kriisin hoitoon on pitää huolta huoltovarmuuden tekijöiden, eli ruoan ja energiantuottajien asemasta. Meidän on vauhditettava ilmastotoimia, mutta järkeistettävä keinoja, joilla EU:ssa tuotetaan maailman puhtainta ruokaa ja päästötöntä energiaa. Näin sosiaaliset ja taloudelliset tappiot ovat lievemmät. Yhteinen velanotto ei ole se tie, mihin kansalaiset Euroopassa haluavat lähteä. Sen sijaan jo sovittua koronan elvytyspakettia voidaan hyödyntää myös tässä kriisissä, sillä iso osa varoista on vielä käyttämättä.
Thank you. Mr. Jan Olbrycht, the floor is yours.
Panie Przewodniczący, Pani Komisarzu, Pani Minister. Dzisiaj rozmawiamy na temat społecznych i gospodarczych konsekwencji dla Unii, ale nie powinniśmy mówić, jakie będą konsekwencje, tylko jakie mogą być konsekwencje. Jeżeli mówimy o tym, jakie mogą być konsekwencje, to jest pytanie, co my, jako Unia Europejska, zrobimy, żeby zredukować negatywne konsekwencje, o ile to jest to możliwe. Jakie my jesteśmy gotowi podjąć kroki. Z zadowoleniem witamy kolejny pakiet sankcji, ale przecież musimy się zastanowić, w jaki sposób dalej ma funkcjonować Unia Europejska, w jaki sposób ma być zorganizowana, w jaki sposób ma być kierowana, w jaki sposób ma być finansowana. Ponieważ jestem sprawozdawcą wieloletnich ram finansowych, chciałem zadać publiczne pytanie panu komisarzowi. Czy wieloletnie ramy finansowe, które dzisiaj mamy, są przygotowane, gotowe odpowiedzieć na wyzwania wojny? Czy to jest konstrukcja, która jest przygotowana na tego typu poważne kryzysy? Ja nie mówię tylko tej wojny, tylko każdego poważnego kryzysu. Odpowiedź jest dosyć czytelna. To nie jest dobrze przygotowane, jeżeli chodzi o takie wyzwania. Musimy to zmienić. Parlament Europejski przygotowuje się w tej chwili do jednak wezwania i Komisji Europejskiej i Rady do tego, żeby przystąpić do zmiany wieloletnich ram finansowych. Potrzebujemy innego typu mechanizmów. To nie tylko chodzi o to, że potrzebujemy więcej pieniędzy. Nareszcie musimy przemyśleć pewne mechanizmy budżetowe. Budżet musi być bardziej elastyczny, musi być bardziej przygotowany na wyzwania. Budżet nie może odsyłać pieniędzy niewydanych do państw członkowskich, tylko musi je zostawić w budżecie. Mam nadzieję, że tym razem Rada to zrozumie. A więc musimy podjąć działania, a nie tylko mówić o tym, jakie będą konsekwencje.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marek Belka, you are the next one.
Panie Przewodniczący, instynktowną reakcją wielu rządów na pędzącą inflację są manewry podatkowe mające dać wrażenie ich obniżek. Z ekonomicznego punktu widzenia takie działania przynieść mogą jednak skutki odwrotne. Dodatkowo napędzić inflację i dać znaczące zyski wielkim graczom, a nie zwykłym ludziom. W obliczu wyzwań, jakie postawiła przed nami agresja Rosji na wolną Ukrainę, czas na bardziej precyzyjne kroki. Oprócz kolejnych sankcji musimy zwiększyć presję podatkową na surowce energetyczne importowane z Rosji, przy tym pomagając najbardziej potrzebującym. Solidarność, o której tak wiele mówimy, musi być mierzona nie w słowach, a w euro. Postawmy sprawę jasno. Niemcy, Holandię, szereg innych krajów stać będzie na udzielenie pomocy swoim przedsiębiorstwom w przypadku ewentualnych strat. Takich krajów członkowskich jest jednak niewiele, a atak Putina na Ukrainę zaboli wszystkich członków naszej wspólnoty. W Polsce, z której pochodzę, pomocy uchodźcom udzielają głównie obywatele i samorządy. Wiedząc, że Krajowy Plan Odbudowy dla Polski jest wstrzymany, może warto pomyśleć o skierowaniu naszej pomocy tam, gdzie jest ona najpilniej potrzebna, czyli właśnie do wspólnot lokalnych, Polaków otwierających swoje domy ukraińskim sąsiadom. and local authorities that help the refugees directly. Because without this support, we will not be able to continue supporting the refugees.
Solidarność od kilkunastu miesięcy odmieniamy przez wszystkie przypadki. W spontanicznych zrywach sprawdziliśmy się w ostatnich latach doskonale. Czas przejść do działań stałych, długofalowych i przemyślanych. Od tego zależy przyszłość projektu, który nazywamy Unią Europejską, naszym wspólnym domem. I może nawiążę do wystąpienia mojego poprzednika. Wojna w Ukrainie postawiła przed nami wielkie wyzwanie zasadniczej przebudowy ekonomicznego zarządzania w Unii Europejskiej. Next Generation EU to powinien być stały element. Powinniśmy tak pomyśleć nad przebudową Stability and Growth Pact, żeby połączyć elastyczność z dyscypliną finansową. Dziękuję bardzo.
Das Wort hat nun unsere Kollegin Sandra Calnietti.
Mr. President, Commissioner, Madam Minister, Ukraina ir un būs piederīga Eiropai. Mums ir jāapzinās, ka kopš Krievijas iebrukuma Ukrainā Eiropa dzīvo kā ar ēnām, taču atšķirībā no Ukraiņiem mēs esam drošībā. Mūs nenogalina, nav jāslēpjas pagrabos no raķetēm un jābēg no mājām. Tāpēc šķiet nepietienīgi sūdzēties par inflācijas un dzīves dārdzības pieaugumu. Atteikšanās no dažām dzīves vērtībām ir mazākais, ko varam darīt, lai Ukraina varētu karā un Eiropā atgrieztos ekonomiski.
Is the least that we can do to help Ukraine to win the war. None of the leading finance institutions in the world are predicting a recession in the European. Even the worst case scenario talks about an inflation rate of about 2%. But if we compare it in the Baltic country, the inflation was 12%, the highest increase in the EU. So that means that the citizens in the least well-off countries are bearing a heavier burden than the richer countries. The longer the war, the more will be demanded of people. And so for that reason, I'm calling on Europe to act quickly to end this war. In order to win this war, Ukraine needs modern heavy weaponry as quickly as possible and also training for Ukrainian soldiers to use these weapons. And at the same time, the EU needs to tighten sanctions against the EU. There needs to be a full embargo on oil, gas and other raw materials to stop the war machinery. And all of these sanctions have to be implemented without leaving any loopholes. According to the estimates for the IMF, Ukraine will need about $5 billion. And in order to help them, we need to think about the future, and the international community has to have special funds for the reconstruction after the end of the war. And we have to understand that Ukraine cannot win this war because a victory of Russia will be a defeat for Europe. The next speaker is Mrs. Dolores Montserrat.
Presidente, mi primer mensaje es al pueblo ucraniano.
Thank you, President. My first message is to the Ukrainian people. We stand by you.
A la guerra,
From the
las
pandemic
crisis se
to
solapan y no
war,
dan un respiro a los europeos, a nuestras familias, los
increasing,
autónomos, los trabajadores, las pymes, la
your
industria.
families,
Los desorbitados precios de la
workers,
energía han
SMEs are
dejado
all affected.
al descubierto
Energy
nuestras
prices
debilidades en un
have
sector
shown
tan
our
estratégico como es el
weaknesses
energético.
in
Hay que frenar
strategic
estas
sectors
subidas
such
ya,
as energy.
bajando el IVA
We have
y
to
los impuestos
start
que gravan la
by
electricidad y los
decreasing
carburantes.
VAT
Europa
and
debe reducir su
helping with
dependencia
fuel and
energética,
electricity.
diversificar las fuentes de
Europe has to
suministro y
diversify
fortalecer
its
las
sources of energy
interconexiones
for its
como el
supply and to strengthen
gasoducto
interconnections, for example,
entre España y el
gas
resto de
ducts
Europa.
between Spain
Además,
and the rest
la guerra ha
of
golpeado
Europe.
a nuestro mercado
Furthermore, the war has
agroalimentario,
hit
pues
our
Ucrania
food
es el
market.
granero de Europa. No
Because
debemos
Ukraine
dar
is the
por
breadbasket
hecho
of
el
Europe.
suministro y la seguridad
We
alimentaria.
have to ensure
Necesitamos
food supply and
abrirnos a otros
security. We have
mercados
to
para
open up to
garantizar
other
que nuestro
markets in order to
ganado se
ensure
pueda
that
alimentar. Necesitamos una PAC
people
con menos
can be fed.
restricciones
We
y
need
que
a CAP with
garantice
fewer
unos
restrictions,
alimentos de
one which will
calidad
guarantee
a precios
quality
razonables.
food at
La
reasonable
inflación,
prices.
el incremento de la factura de la luz y la subida de la
Inflation
cesta de la
and increase in
compra
electricity bills
asfixia a
and
millones
drops
de
in
europeos.
purchasing power are
Con las
suffocating
cosas de
millions of
comer
Europeans.
no se juega. La Comisión Europea hoy ha presentado un paquete con buenas medidas. Pero, por ejemplo, la Comisión Europea todavía hoy no ha recibido la propuesta del gobierno español para topar el precio del gas en la península ibérica. Un gobierno que ni escucha a la oposición, ni ejecuta lo que prometen y abandona a los españoles. España necesita menos propaganda gubernamental y más rigor. Los populares pedimos bajar impuestos, que los fondos europeos lleguen a la economía real y creen empleo y reducir el gasto público superfluo del macrogobierno de España. Europa necesita gobiernos con presidentes que pongan el interés de sus ciudadanos por encima de los suyos. Muchas gracias.
Above their own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. We are coming to the Catch the Eye. I can give everybody who asked for the floor, and I will start with Mr. Andreas Koupidis.
Mr. President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, I would like first of all to congratulate and to thank Commission President for his statement about sanctions and also about Ukraine reconstruction package. It is our war, and we need to take care first of all about the biggest needs, and this is Ukraine. We shall have problems also, but our economies will not go down by 50%. It is obvious that reconstruction after the war will demand big amount of our money, hundreds of billions or even trillion euros. But it also will open new opportunities both for Ukraine and for EU itself for modernization. Investment of such scale will create new jobs. We successfully invested a trillion to fight COVID pandemic. Now it's time to invest $1 trillion into the fight against Kremlin fascism pandemic, for arms deliveries, for reconstruction, for mitigation of war consequences on our side. We know how to do it, and let's create a special fund for reconstruction of Ukraine till the end of June, when decisions on candidate status will be made. Ukraine victory is the only way for all of us to live with peace on the European continent. There is no way for a cheap peace. Thanks a lot.
Danke. Madame Marques, Margarida.
Mrs. Margarida Marques.
Muito obrigada, Presidente, Presidente, Vice-Presidente, Ministra. Na resposta europeia à crise Covid, os europeus sentiram que a União Europeia os protegia e lhes abria perspectivas. A criação do programa SURE ou do Next Generation EU tornou bem visível o valor e a importância da União Europeia, não só na proteção dos empregos, mas também no relançamento das economias europeias. É esta decisão que os europeus esperam agora da União Europeia para responder aos impactos sociais e económicos da guerra e das sanções nas suas vidas, nos custos da energia, dos bens alimentares, no aprofundamento de uma autonomia estratégica, que crie os instrumentos necessários. Por isso esperamos que a Comissão Europeia proponha a criação de programa e financiamento respectivo para a transição e a autonomia energética, mas também que compense o aumento dos custos da energia para as pessoas e para as empresas. E esperamos o Repower EU. Esperamos também a criação do Next Generation EU 2.0, que assegure o investimento que comece a ter um caráter permanente. Finalmente, as novas prioridades não podem secundarizar os objetivos europeus na transição climática e na transição digital. Muito obrigada.
Thank you. Mr.
Joachim Stanislav next.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie przewodniczący. Skutkiem społecznym i politycznym agresji Rosji na Ukrainę powinno być w pierwszej kolejności opadnięcie łusek z oczu tych polityków w Niemczech, Francji, Holandii czy Belgii, którzy uważali, że poprzez interesy z Putinem i napędzaniem rosyjskiej machiny wojennej miliardami euro z rosyjskiego satrapy uda się stworzyć miłującego pokój demokratów. Dziś czas na realne działania. Żadne górnolotne słowa, marsze protestu czy rysowanie kredkami po chodnikach nie zatrzymają rosyjskiej agresji na Ukrainę. Tylko twarde i konsekwentne sankcje, całkowite odejście od rosyjskiego gazu i ropy, solidarne wsparcie militarne dla Ukrainy i mam tu na myśli ciężki sprzęt wojskowy, a nie zalegające w magazynach Bundeswehry niepotrzebne hełmy może powstrzymać Putina. Kolejnym niezwykle ważnym aspektem społecznym i politycznym agresji Rosji na Ukrainę musi być całkowita solidarność wszystkich państw członkowskich Unii z tymi państwami, które dziś wzięły na swoje barki ogromny wysiłek pomocy humanitarnej dla milionów ukraińskich uchodźców wojennych, takich jak Słowacja, Czechy czy mój kraj Polska. I dlatego wstydem jest, że do dziś Komisja Europejska nie skierowała do tych państw ani jednego euro pomocy. My w Polsce nie tworzymy zamkniętych gett, nie mówimy o relokacji. Miliony Polaków przyjmują Ukraińców pod swój dach. Wykazujemy absolutną solidarność i oczekujemy, tak samo jak inne państwa Europy Środkowo-Wschodniej, takiej solidarności ze strony Komisji Europejskiej. Dziękuję uprzejmie.
Thank you, Mr. Mick Wallace.
The social and economic consequences for the EU of the Russian war in Ukraine are immense. Ukraine, the EU and the Global South are the biggest losers in this war. The impact on fuel, oil, energy and agriculture prices, declining supplies of food, means that many countries will be unable to pay their foreign debts. The euro has been undermined and we're risking an EU-wide recession. But the US sees big opportunities. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was crystal clear on this in her April 13th speech. She detailed how the US will use the IMF to provide conditional assistance to struggling states friendly to US geostrategic interests, while threatening sanctions against any countries thinking of continuing to do any business with Russia. Pope Francis has come out and apportioned blame on NATO for the war and questioned the wisdom of supplying arms to Ukraine. NATO says they are ready to fuel the war for years. The US needs the war to reinforce the unipolar power, while Ukraine, the people of Europe and hundreds of millions in the global south will pay the price. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Kollege Eugen Tomak.
Thank you, Eugen Tomak.
Vă mulțumesc, domnule președinte, domnule comisar. Peste 52 de miliarde de euro au plecat din Uniunea Europeană de la 1 ianuarie 2022 până la 1 mai anul acesta. Cred că această cifră spune totul, pentru că noi luăm petrol, gaze și cărbune din Rusia și în schimbul acestor facilități comerciale susținem o țară care nu mai respectă nicio regulă. Tocmai de aceea salut sancțiunile noi anunțate astăzi de președinta Ursula von der Leyen, însă cred că nu este suficient, trebuie să facem mai mult pentru a slăbi Rusia, pentru a convinge pe Putin să renunțe la acest război inutil, fără sens. Cred că este important să sistem importul de petrol, dar și mai important este să găsim soluții pentru a opri complet importul de gaz și să susținem statele astfel încât să poată rezista oricăror provocări pe viitor. Mai mult decât atât, peste 5 milioane de cetățeni ai Ucrainei și-au părăsit casele și sunt astăzi în Uniunea Europeană. Sper ca la viitoarea plenară Ursula von der Leyen să ne anunțe că s-a creat un fond pentru refugiați. Sunt 5 milioane de cetățeni care așteaptă un suport concret din partea Uniunii Europene. Statele membre au făcut tot ceea ce au putut în această situație de criză, dar de acum încolo trebuie să acționăm instituțional, să-i susținem pe oameni, să integrăm în societățile noastre până când vom fi capabili să mergem acolo în Ucraina, să o reconstruim după ce se va încheia acest război absurd. Ei au nevoie de casele lor, ei au nevoie de o perspectivă europeană și doar împreună o putem construi prin acțiuni concrete implementate imediat. Vă mulțumesc.
Danke. Zu Wort gemeldet hat sich Frau Maria Grapini.
Domnule președinte, domnule comisar, stimați colegi, aveam mari așteptări la dezbaterea de astăzi pentru că tema era consecințele asupra Uniunii Europene. Din păcate, doamna președinte nu ne-a prezentat consecințele. Eu o să vorbesc în numele unei țări care a fost în prima linie, România. Cetățenii din România mă întreabă totuși. Ei au fost ospitalieri, generoși, au primit refugiații și este normal să fim solidari. Problema este că ce împart românii? Împart veniturile cele mai mici din Uniunea Europeană, împart sărăcia cu refugiații. Ce se întâmplă? Bugetul României este alocat sigur pentru a ajuta și refugiații. Dar ce face Uniunea Europeană? A sprijinit concret statele membre, Polonia, România, Slovacia, Slovenia, Cehia, care au primit cei mai mulți refugiați? Nu. Care sunt consecințele asupra Uniunii Europene? Faptul că scade creșterea economică, faptul că sunt spulberate IMM-urile, faptul că sunt decapitalizate IMM-urile. Nu este cazul Comisia să regândească toate planurile care le-am avut, sigur, cu ambiții, cu responsabilitate, dar acum suntem în alt context. Domnule comisar, dacă întrebați un mic întreprinzător, el își schimbă planul de afaceri când factori externi influențează. Și Uniunea Europeană și noi trebuie să ne schimbăm, pentru că altfel vom distruge economia interioară. Toate lanțurile de aprovizionare au fost fracturate, degeaba avem o strategie de reindustrializare, degeaba avem planuri pe hârtie, dacă în mod concret cetățenii nu sunt ajutați, sărăcesc mai departe și nu pot să le crească veniturile, dacă companiile, dacă întreprinderile mici și mijlocii nu vor avea șanse să-și revină după dubla criză, criza pandemică și iată acum criza din război. Așadar, eu în numele românilor vă cer să știți, nu trăiesc, nu se încălzesc, nu se hrănesc din mulțumirile noastre. Ei așteaptă măsuri concrete și aștept, domnule comisar, în răspunsul dumneavoastră să ne spuneți ce veți face concret pentru a, într-adevăr, a diminua consecințele războiului asupra Uniunii Europene. Vă mulțumesc.
Thank you very much. Danke.
Thank you.
Kollegin Angelika Niebler.
Angelika Niebler is the next speaker.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender, Herr Kommissionsvertreter, meine lieben Kolleginnen und Kollegen. 70 Tage nun dauert schon dieser fürchterliche Krieg, der so unendliches Leid und Zerstörung bringt. Ich denke, wir müssen wirklich alles machen, um diesen Krieg so schnell wie möglich zu beenden. Und damit ist es auch notwendig, den Druck auf Putin wo immer möglich zu erhöhen. Ich begrüße ausdrücklich das 6. Sanktionspaket. Ich glaube, es ist ein wuchtiger Aufschlag. Zum einen, dass die Sperrbank jetzt auch ausgeschlossen wird vom SWIFT-Zahlungssystem und das Ölembargo, so wie es jetzt vorgesehen ist, ist, glaube ich, der richtige Schritt. Natürlich müssen wir uns überlegen, welche Auswirkungen und Konsequenzen diese fürchterliche Situation in der Ukraine auch auf uns hat. Und da bin ich bei der Vorrednerin, ehrlich gesagt. Jeder ist betroffen. Wir haben Preisexplosionen ohne Ende. Die Energiepreise steigen. Wir haben eine riesen galoppierende Inflation. Und wir müssen auch auf europäischer Ebene, finde ich, noch weit mehr machen und reagieren. Das Leben unserer Bürgerinnen und Bürger in der ganzen Europäischen Union muss bezahlbar bleiben. Ich denke, Mitgliedstaaten haben da eine große Verantwortung, haben auch schon viel unternommen, Mehrwertsteuer runter, Abgaben runter, Zuschüsse geben, wo es notwendig ist. Ich glaube, das ist in dieser Krisensituation wirklich erforderlich. Ich denke, wir müssen auch noch mal überlegen, wo wir Mittel umstrukturieren können, um eben vor Ort zu unterstützen und zu helfen. Und liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, auch der Europäischen Zentralbank kommt eine wichtige Aufgabe zu. Also Preisstabilität ist die Aufgabe der EZB und sie muss ihrer Verantwortung wirklich jetzt mal gerecht werden und auch an der Zinsschraube drehen, wie das die FED auch in den USA gemacht hat. Wir müssen unsere Unternehmen, unsere Betriebe, vor allem unseren gesunden Mittelstand entlasten, wo wir ihn nur entlasten können. Wir müssen sicherstellen, dass die Versorgungssicherheit garantiert wird, ist angesprochen worden, mit Blick auf die Stabilisierung unserer Energieversorgung, Rohstoffe, Lebensmittel, da ist ja schon einiges passiert, dass Brachflächen jetzt auch bewirtschaftet werden können. Und ich glaube, das ist genau der richtige Weg und in dem Sinne müssen wir weitermachen. Also bitte Kommission auch den Blick auf unsere Situation vor Ort hier in der Europäischen Union lenken. Danke.
Herr Kollege Kostas Papadakis.
Kostas Papadakis, the next speaker.
Τα περί αλληλεγγύης και ενιαίας απάντησης στο ρώσικο εκβιασμό, οι ασάφειες σκοπιμότητας δεν μπορούν να κρύψουν τις σφοδρές αντιθέσεις στο εσωτερικό της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης ανάμεσα στις κυβερνήσεις. Όλα τα σενάρια υπαγορεύονται από την ευρωενωσιακή στρατηγική της απελευθέρωσης της ενέργειας, της πράσινης μετάβασης, της απολιγνητοποίησης, του χρηματιστήριου των ρήπων που είχαν εκτινάξει τις τιμές και την ενεργειακή φτώχεια μήνες πρώτου πολέμου και υπηρέτησαν όλες οι κυβερνήσεις και στην Ελλάδα. Πίσω από τις φιέστες της ελληνικής κυβέρνησης και τον τερματικό σταθμό αεριοποίησης στην Αλεξανδρούπολη που αποτελεί και στρατιωτικό ορμητήριο του υπεριαλιστικού πολέμου, βρίσκεται η αντικατάσταση του ρώσικου αερίου από πανάκριβο αμερικάνικο LNG, φέρνοντας μεγάλα κέρδη και στους μεταφορείς Έλληνες εφοπλιστές. Όλοι αυτοί οι σχεδιασμοί, οι αλλεπάλληλες κυρώσεις προϋποθέτουν βαρύ λογαριασμό για το λαό και νέα κέρδη για τα μονοπόλια. Τη στιγμή μάλιστα που πυκνώνουν διεθνώς οι ανησυχίες των εκτελείων της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης και του Διεθνούς Νομισματικού Ταμείου για επικείμενη νέα περιδίνηση σε καπιταλιστική κρίση. Μόνη διέξοδος ο λαϊκός αγώνας για ουσιαστικά μέτρα ανακούφισης, κατάργηση των έμεσων φόρων, του χρηματιστηρίου της ενέργειας, άμεσης και πλήρους επαναλειτουργίας των λιγνητικών μονάδων με απόσυρση από τις κυρώσεις προς τη Ρωσία.
Thank you.
That concludes the Catch the Eye round. We conclude with Mr. Gahler.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Wer schnell hilft, hilft doppelt. Deswegen ist auch der Zeitplan des Europäischen Parlaments bei der Verhängung der Sanktionen ambitionierter als der des Rates. Ich begrüße ausdrücklich das, was die Kommissionspräsidentin heute als sechstes Paket vorgelegt hat. Aber nach Auffassung des Parlaments sollte auch das Ölembargo jetzt kommen. Die Kommission sollte sich nicht erschöpfen in der Rolle, den kleinsten gemeinsamen Nenner des Rates zu notifizieren. Gemeinsam könnten Kommission und Europäisches Parlament den Rat zu einem ambitionierteren Zeitplan treiben. Wenn wir dem menschenverachtenden faschistischen Regime in Moskau schneller den Geldhahn abdrehen, dann erhöht sich auch die Wahrscheinlichkeit, den Krieg schneller zu beenden. Die Mehrkosten für das Öl, das auf dem Weltmarkt vorhanden ist, sollten wir gemeinsam tragen. Dauert der Krieg länger, haben wir die höheren Kosten bei den Waffenlieferungen, bei der Versorgung der Flüchtlinge, bei den Kosten des Wiederaufbaus und bei einer stärkeren Rezession als Kriegsfolge. Und das sollten wir auch mit einrechnen in die Gesamtüberlegung. Ich finde, die Kommission sollte auch gemeinsam mit der Präsidentschaft sehr kreativ allen Mitgliedstaaten dabei behilflich sein, jetzt auch eine Verkürzung der Frist bis zum Ölembargo aufzuzeigen. Es gibt auf dem Weltmarkt, wie gesagt, genug, aber vielleicht ist nicht jedes Mitgliedsland in der Lage, sich dieser Dinge dann auch zu bemächtigen. Und deswegen hoffe ich, dass man den Zeitplan auf jeden Fall verkürzen kann. Die Forderung des Parlaments auch aus dem letzten Plenum ist allerdings, dass das Ölembargo jetzt kommen sollte, dann hilft es besser in der Verkürzung des Krieges, nicht erst im Herbst. Und damit helfen wir auch unseren ukrainischen Freunden, die hier einen existenziellen Kampf führen. Slava Ukraini.
Danke, Herr Kollege. Wir kommen nun zu den abschließenden Bemerkungen der Kommission und des Rates. Und ich darf mit Herrn Vizepräsidenten Šefčovič beginnen.
Let me give the floor to Vice President Šefčovič.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Madam la Ministra, honourable members of the European Parliament. Many of you clearly stated that those with the broadest shoulders should carry the biggest load. I think that was a quote from Madam Jongerius, but I very much felt the same attitude from most of the honourable members who intervened this morning. And I think that I'm totally in agreement with Madam de Lange, who said that thanks to support of this House, EU is indeed leading force in helping Ukraine to defend itself and in making sure that Russia pays exorbitant political and economic price for this atrocious war. Our major leverage is our political European unity which is forged in a debate like this, but also our economic strength, which allows us to proceed with tough, unprecedented sanctions which hurts aggressors more and more. Today we proceed with a fixed package of sanctions, and I really would like to thank you for your encouragement, for your support, because to quote Mr. Garicano and Mr. Galler just a minute ago, banning oil imports from Russia seemed too difficult just a few weeks ago. Today we are proceeding. Today we are doing just that, and we make sure that we would proceed in concerted way to have every single government on board. And as you know, this is not an easy task, but we are working on this unity, and I'm very encouraged by the support we hear in this House and by the discussions we have with our member states. I think Mr. Marques underscored in a very able way that the political unity indeed is our major strength, and economic power is our major leverage. Several honourable members, Mr. Fernandes, Mr. Shirdevan, but many others are rightly reminding us that our unprecedented sanctions affect our citizens and businesses in Europe as well. And I want to reassure you that we in the Commission are also very much concerned by the high energy prices, and we are looking into all opportunities how to tackle them and how to use all the possibilities we have at our disposal, and we will come up with some proposals and solutions under our Recover Plan, which we will present to you in coming days. It will still be in this month in May. We are, of course, looking at other possibilities how to help economically and financially to our member states and to our citizens. Mr. Belka and Mr. Olbrycht have been asking the questions, is our budget fit for war? Of course, it was prepared in different times, under different circumstances, but at the same time, we have to act and we have to play with the cards we have, with the budgetary means which are at our disposal. And therefore, I thought that I would bring some figures to you, because through you, I believe we can communicate directly also with our citizens and with our member states. So far, we have 22 out of 27 recovery plans in place, and we have disbursed already 70 billion euros to our member states. We hope that in coming days and weeks we will reach the mark of 100 billion euros, which will be dispensed under our recovery plans. And as I'm sure you know, and Mr. Olbrycht is a rapporteur, he knows these figures by heart, almost 180 billion, 177 billion euros precisely is geared towards climate goals, which of course today are a purpose for making sure that we would lower our dependence on Russia, we would increase the portion of renewables energy in our systems, and in that way subsequently lower the prices. Having mentioned all these figures, I also would like to underline that 220 billion euros of loans are still available. There is still this huge envelope which we want to use, and we are exploring all the possibilities with the member states how to do that. And this goes into the direction of what Madam Niebler said, that we have to repurpose, redirect the means we have currently available. On top of this, as Madam Katainen was highlighting, we also identified 17 billion euros of post-pandemic cohesion funds which are still not used, and we proceeded very quickly just to avoid the situation that this money, which are so badly needed, would be returned back to the member states, and we introduced the utmost flexibility on urgent needs to support exactly what Madam Garcia Perez but many others have been asking, how we can support the member states with the highest number of refugees like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria and many others, with housing, with education, with healthcare and childcare. Just from the top of my head, but we'll be of course very happy to provide you with the more precise figures. I think Poland got more than 288 million from the 17 billion package. I mean, there was quite significant sum coming to Slovakia, I'm sure to Romania, but I understand that what we need here is a little bit more clarity and transparency, and therefore we are going to prepare the table where we will see what is the overall fund, what are the disburse money for each member state and what is still available, so we can all work with concrete figures to make it more user-friendly. Thanks to Elisa Ferreira, my colleague, we established one-stop shop and special task force which can give the advice to the member states how they can repurpose and reuse the money, and I hope that this would make it much more faster and easier to use for our member states. And I just want to pass this message also through you, so the member states are aware and are, I would say, ready to check what is available from the budgetary means we have. Of course, I totally agree with all of you that if it comes to the overall, let's hope as soon as possible, post-war recovery for Ukraine, I'm absolutely sure that Europe will be leading force and will lead the effort here as well. But it's also very clear that the needs would be enormous. We are talking about hundreds of billions of euros, and therefore we are already now approaching G7 member states, IMF, World Bank, different international financial institutions, because it will have to be indeed a collective effort. But I agree with all of you who underscored in this debate that there is no price tag if it comes to freedom, if it comes to liberty, if it comes to democracy, and I'm absolutely sure that Ukrainian people, first and foremost, but also Europe, will rise to the challenge to rebuild free, democratic and prosperous Ukraine. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, honourable members. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Vizepräsident.
Thank you very much, Vice President. And now for the Council Presidency, I'd like to give the floor to Brigitte Klinkert.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President, Vice President of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen.
Merci pour ce débat
thank you for the debate. I think it was an important and rich debate on Schengen. To respond to Mrs. Garcia Perez, I just want to reassure her that the French presidency will undertake every effort to contribute to the
Nous saluons
running of the zone without controls at the border. We welcome the efforts by Romania and Bulgaria in the support being provided to Ukrainian refugees on minimum salaries in response to Mrs. Saturi. I can reassure you that the French presidency would like to reach an agreement with the Parliament, and there will be a trialogue this week. Ladies and gentlemen, the European reaction to the humanitarian crisis caused by the war and also the scope and of the measures implemented shows that our union is more united than ever. All member states, without exception, have demonstrated great solidarity with the millions of people who have been fleeing the conflict by participating actively at many levels to this collective effort. Of course, there is still a great deal to be done to avoid negative impact on our economy, our labour markets and our society, and also to consolidate inclusive and sustainable growth. No one should feel they are being left behind in Europe. And I would like to highlight our determination, our joint commitment as institutions to support the most vulnerable and the most affected by the consequences of this war. The Council, together with the Parliament and the Commission, is ready to make its contribution to face these major challenges, and I thank you once again for the debate, and I thank you very much for listening.
Merci, Madame. Die Aussprache ist damit geschlossen. Die Abstimmung findet während der nächsten Tagung statt. Die Sitzung ist für wenige Minuten jetzt unterbrochen. Sie wird um 11 Uhr wieder aufgenommen.
There will be a brief suspension. Session will be resumed at 11 o'clock.